Chapter 21, Konoha Year 60. Luxurious panel time flies. Years slip by like beads on a cord. In the blink of an eye, childhood had ended. It was late March in Konoha Year 60, and the most remarkable generation of academy students were finally entering graduation season. Izayoi-kun, wake up, there's the graduation assessment today. Izayoi had slept in for once. He floated in the last threads of a dream until a gentle female voice pulled him back to the world. The voice belonged to someone sitting right beside him, yet she didn't jolt him awake, proof of the depth of Izayoi's trust in her, utterly unguarded. He blinked his eyes open. At first the room was hazy, then the silhouette of the girl beside him sharpened into view, a small, delicate face that had shed its childish roundness. Long black hair she'd been growing since she was 6 fell like silk to her waist. The skin visible beneath her white windbreaker and black mesh lining was like fresh snow. Her Byakugan, unlike most Hyuga, carried a faint, nearly imperceptible tint of light purple that made her eyes look like clear, precious gems. Her lips, the color of cherry blossoms, curved into a gentle smile. She leaned over with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the boy who had just woken. For a few seconds, Izayoi simply stared at Hinata. He felt a little stunned, as if the chubby, adorable kid he remembered was still there. Then his gaze dropped, and a mischievous grin appeared. "Hinata, did you grow bigger again?" "Ah!" Hinata gasped, suddenly aware of how undignified her posture had been. She zipped her windbreaker up to her neck, spun around with a flush on her face, and stammered, Izayoi-kun, hurry and wash up. I brought breakfast." She hurried out of the room. Izayoi, fond of teasing his childhood friend, stretched, rose, and went to the ensuite bathroom. While brushing his teeth, he examined himself in the mirror. 6 years had passed. The chubby child with black hair and blue eyes had matured. His features were more sculpted and handsome. Short black hair, still a little mussed from sleep, framed a face with sharp angles. His blue eyes, the same color as Uzumaki Naruto's but slightly deeper, glimmered in the light. Then, in the next breath, those blue irises shifted, the pupils whitening, the eyes taking on the same faint purplish hue as Hinata's Byakugan. This time, though, the temples at his head sides did not bulge with veins. In the past, whenever he activated his Byakugan, the veins at his temples would stand out. Since the start of the year, that feature had disappeared. Izayoi narrowed his eyes. A translucent panel, visible only to him and not reflected in the mirror, materialized in front of him. Talent entries. Otsutsuki Bloodline, red. Sage's Eye, red. Prince of the Byakugan, red. 6 Paths Aptitude, red. Bloodline Limit, Byakugan, gold. Chakra Control, gold. Uzumaki Bloodline, purple, plus all attribute physique, plus. Medical Genius, points 12,391. After 6 years at the academy, Izayoi's panel had become ostentatiously rich. Beyond the original Otsutsuki Bloodline, he had gained 3 red entries. Sage's Eye, red, from Uchiha Sasuke. Prince of the Byakugan, red. The power that had awakened from Hinata 2 years earlier and had been automatically renamed on fusion, and 6 Paths Aptitude, red, which he had elevated himself. While most students had only a basic ninja aptitude, or none at all, Izayoi now had 4 red entries, the highest known tier. Even Uzumaki Naruto, the child of destiny with Asura's chakra, half of the Nine Tails, and a native Uzumaki lineage, paled in comparison. If one looked closely at the panel, however, an oddity stood out. Almost 5 full years had passed since Izayoi fused Sage's Eye red, yet his list still hadn't unlocked Bloodline Limit Sharingan, purple, or Uchiha Bloodline, purple. The reason was simple: Bloodline Limit Byakugan, gold. In late June of Konoha Year 58, Izayoi had received a belated birthday gift, a red entry from Hinata. After fusing, the entry had changed its name. In the nearly 2 years since, Izayoi's chakra reserves had fluctuated dramatically. He couldn't precisely quantify the chakra of a sage body, but he was certain of this. If Uzumaki Naruto didn't have half a tailed beast and wasn't chronically undernourished, his chakra pool, despite a sage body, would still be much smaller than Izayoi's. Izayoi's vast ocean-like chakra naturally included yin release chakra. Converted to numbers, his yin chakra would long since have reached the level to awaken the Sharingan, or even evolve a Mangekyo. Yet he hadn't awakened the Sharingan. The yin chakra secreted by his brain was all absorbed by the Byakugan, unable to concentrate in the pupils to birth new ocular techniques. Meanwhile, the Byakugan that had been soaking up that yin chakra quietly shifted from purple to gold in Konoha, year 59. Since the fusion that produced Prince of the Byakugan Red, Izayoi's Byakugan had also changed its long-range capabilities periodically. Now it could see an astounding 80 kilometers with full 360-degree omnidirectional long-range and X-ray vision. That range outclassed even the Whirlpool clan's mind's eye of the Kagura. Izayoi's sensing had reached the strongest level of the era. It had been almost a year since the Byakugan upgrade. Soon, Izayoi murmured. He rinsed, spat the foamy water away, and wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. His fingers brushed the outer corner of his right eye as he looked at the faintly purple Byakugan in the mirror. I can feel it. The first quickening is coming. Izayoi's current configuration likely exceeded Otsutsuki Toneri's. At 19, Toneri had already realized much of his potential. His Otsutsuki lineage and sage body had been developed to a high degree, which allowed him to awaken the ultimate ocular technique, the reincarnation eye, in a matter of days. But neither Izayoi nor Toneri had yet fully realized their potential now. Even transplanting Hinata or Hanabi's Byakugan wouldn't let them evolve it into the reincarnation eye within days, like in the stories. Yet if the Byakugan were transplanted simultaneously to someone like Izayoi, his speed of awakening would almost certainly surpass Toneri's. Sage's Eye Red was Izayoi's trump card. Possessing both the Sage's Eye and the Prince of the Byakugan, effectively stacked two acceleration hacks. At 12 years old, he already had the potential to awaken an ultimate ocular technique, an achievement even more outrageous than Uchiha Itachi's awakening of the Mangekyo at 11. Chapter 22, Graduation Assessment. Didn't I tell you yesterday the exam wouldn't take long? You didn't have to bring me breakfast. Izanami closed his Byakugan and walked out of his room. He found Hinata already sitting at the table with several bento boxes laid out. Despite his protest, he sat down without ceremony and began eating the breakfast she'd prepared. I didn't ask for it. I just forgot to tell Hanabi, he said between mouthfuls. Hinata rested her hands on the table and smiled. Hanabi got up earlier than I did and made you an exam bento especially. She's thoughtful. Izanami brightened at the sight. In one box were rice balls wrapped in seaweed, the kanji for pass the exam, cleverly cut from daikon shreds. His appetite improved immediately. You should eat some too. I can't finish all this by myself, he offered as he kept eating. No need. I already had breakfast at home. Hinata shook her head, walked to the refrigerator, and poured 2 cups of milk, one for each of them. From waking him to pouring milk, her ease and familiarity made the house feel like hers. In truth, it had become exactly that. For years now, Hinata and Hanabi had treated Izanami's place as a second home. Izanami had never set foot in the Hyuga compound, yet both girls had keys to his house. They shopped for groceries, shared chores, and often spent their free time there. The arrangement had become routine for both of them. After finishing breakfast and washing the dishes, Izanami and Hinata left together for the Ninja Academy. The pair, a handsome boy and a pretty girl, drew attention on the walk. 6 years had passed, and Izanami had grown into a good-looking youth. He was now 1.63 meters tall. In the Hidden Cloud village, that height was nothing remarkable, but in Konoha, where most of his peers averaged around 1.5 meters, he stood out. Hinata had changed as well. Izanami couldn't remember how tall she'd been in the original timeline, but this Hinata was taller and more developed than before. With a strong appetite and plenty of exercise, she'd grown to about 1.55 meters, several centimeters taller than most girls her age, and had a more mature figure. Even in a loose white windbreaker, her build was noticeable. Izanami found his eyes drawn to her the moment he woke. He'd often admired how different reality could feel from the stories he'd read. Izanami-kun, Hinata, morning, Minako greeted them as they approached. Good morning, Minako. You two are still inseparable, aren't you a couple? Today was March 24th. Students in 1st through 5th grade had finished their annual exams yesterday. The 6th graders' graduation assessment was held a day later. The campus was much quieter than usual, populated mostly by 6th graders. At the gates, a number of parents lingered, unusually nervous and waiting outside for results. 6 years of training boiled down to this day. Could their children move beyond ordinary life and become full-fledged ninja? Most parents waiting were ordinary civilians or civilian ninja. The children from major ninja clans didn't have their parents around. For those kids, passing the assessment was almost a formality. Even if they failed, family connections or secret techniques could secure them placement in specialized units. For everyone else, today mattered in a different way. On the way to class, Izanami and Hinata ran into several classmates who greeted them warmly. Friends teased them about being a couple. Izanami only smiled. Hinata lowered her head, cheeks flushing faintly. They had been desk mates since first grade and were rarely seen apart. At first, some girls had circled around Izanami without noticing the bond between him and Hinata, but when they realized his attitude toward Hinata was different, they drifted away. Hinata wasn't someone to provoke. She was the Hyuga clan's eldest daughter, consistently among the top students, and her gentle fist made her a fearsome opponent in taijutsu. Classmates avoided her not because of punches, but because of the pressure point strikes that left one suddenly in intense pain or numbness. It was worse than being hit. Most boys and girls in class had learned that lesson firsthand, and they didn't dare pick fights. Besides, there was always Sasuke Uchiha for anyone looking for a different crowd. With Hinata at his side, Izanami no longer needed excuses to refuse invitations. Arriving at the classroom, they found it already filling up. Some students whispered, others sat tensely, fists clenched with nerves. Even Naruto Uzumaki, who had vandalized the Hokage rock yesterday and caused the class to be randomly tested on the transformation technique, was unusually quiet. Izanami and Hinata traded a few low words as they took their seats, appearing unbothered by the looming assessment. A girl beside Hinata watched them with envy. Honor students did inspire confidence. Unlike her, she'd been on edge since yesterday and hadn't slept well at all. Chapter 23. Sasuke was stripped naked. Ring, ring, ring. Izanami and Hinata had only exchanged a few hushed words when the class bell rang. The whole room fell silent at once. An unusual sight. The graduation exam topic is Shadow Clone. The testing room is at the end of the right corridor. Those whose names are called, please come out. Shortly after the bell, Iruka Umino appeared in the doorway. He didn't take his place at the podium. He gave a brief instruction and left. A chunin in a green vest soon stood at the door with a list and began calling names. Minako. Every minute or two, the chunin read another name. Students called up, nervous or confident, stood and left, not to return. Hinata was one of them. Izanami. A few minutes after Hinata left, Izanami's name was called. He stood, walked out, and made his way down the corridor to the testing room. Pushing the door open, he saw Iruka and Mizuki, his class teacher, sitting at a long table. Iruka gave him a warm smile. Izanami, begin. Yes. Izanami nodded, formed the seals, and called softly, Shadow Clone. Bang! Two popping sounds overlapped. Clouds of white smoke burst into being to his left and right. When the smoke cleared, two perfect replicas of Izanami stood beside him. Same face, same height, identical clothes and details. Iruka and Mizuki eyed the clones up and down and exchanged a look. Iruka then stood, took out a genin forehead protector, and smiled. Your shadow clones are perfect. Congratulations, you've passed the graduation exam. From now on, you're a genin. Thank you, Iruka-sensei, Mizuki-sensei. Izanami stepped forward, accepted the forehead protector with both hands, and bowed slightly. Iruka gave instructions. You don't need to return to the classroom. Don't leave the village yet. Go to our class training ground and wait for the others to finish. After that, I'll take you for your official archive photos. I understand. Izanami left the testing room. Outside the building, Hinata was waiting for him. They smiled at one another and walked to the training ground together. About 10 classmates already waited there. Yo, Iza, Hina, you made it. The exam wasn't hard for you, huh? After the photos, should we celebrate? Maybe later. I want to celebrate with my family. They're waiting for me outside. True. Let's meet up another time. How many from our class do you think will pass? At least 20. We are class 1 after all. Anyway, Naruto's doomed. As Izanami and Hinata joined them, classmates clustered around to chat. Then Sasuke Uchiha walked over. Izanami, want to spar later? At the sight of Sasuke, usually third in their year, sometimes second, people gave them space. Sasuke's expression was all challenge. Izanami smiled and shook his head. Not now. I heard genin will be put into three-person squads and train under a jonin. You and I already know what each other can do. No matter how many times we fight, the result won't change. Let's train under our jonin first, then see how we've improved. Sasuke recalled the many times Izanami had beaten him. His fighting spark dimmed, and he nodded. Fine, we'll spar later. All right. Over the past few years, Izanami's surplus points, enough to upgrade his chakra control while still leaving more than 10,000, were largely due to sparring with Sasuke. In the first 2 years, they had fought almost weekly, sometimes twice a week. That grind was how many of Izanami's talent entries had appeared. Sage Eye, red, once, repeated appearances of things like Kage-level aptitude, purple, Uchiha bloodline, purple, and even Otsutsuki bloodline, blue. Izanami converted all those entries into points. More than 10,000 of those points had come from Sasuke. The rest came from Hinata and other classmates, with Hinata providing the majority among them. In their class, Izanami stood a tier above everyone else. Sasuke and Hinata occupied the first tier. Clan-affiliated students sat in the second tier. The rest were in the third. By their third year, apart from Sasuke and Hinata, it became very hard for anyone, Ino Yamanaka or other classmates, to generate meaningful talent entries. Occasional entries did appear, but they were usually low-level. Fortunately, raw chakra capacity wasn't the only measure. Otherwise, Uzumaki Naruto alone would have been able to generate the high-level entries across the whole school. Years of sparring had pushed Sasuke's strength far beyond what he'd been in the original timeline. Among the status icons that hovered around him, one had already changed. Uchiha Bloodline, purple, had evolved into Bloodline Limit, Sharingan, purple. In other words, Sasuke had awakened the Sharingan and could activate it at will. In this timeline, he'd truly awakened during the night of the Uchiha clan massacre. With the Sharingan open, Sasuke had grown arrogant. Besides Izanami, the only one who still drew his attention was Hinata. Her taijutsu and rank made her a real rival for second place. If Izanami, Sasuke, and Hinata were put on the same squad, they would be the strongest genin team without question. No new generation Ino Shika Cho, no Gaara-led trio from the sand, could match them, but that clearly wasn't going to happen. Fate and their roles meant Sasuke and Naruto were destined to end up together on the same team, and no one in Konoha was better suited to be their jonin instructor than Kakashi Hatake. Just as Izanami had been told, the graduation exam didn't last long. After a while, the other students who had passed began to appear on the playground. Before long, Iruka Umino arrived as well, clipboard in hand. The only familiar face missing was Uzumaki Naruto. The rest who weren't there had failed and been eliminated. "Sorry to keep you waiting, class," Iruka said with a smile. "Everyone, put on your headbands. We're going to take your official photos now." "Sensei, where should we wear the headband?" a student asked. "Anywhere on your upper body is fine," Iruka replied. So they wore the forehead protectors in all sorts of ways, tied around foreheads, looped on arms, hung around necks, used as hairbands. Hinata wore hers around her neck. Izanami tied his on his left arm. Once everyone had their headbands on, Iruka led them up to the rooftop of the main building. The photographer was already there with a tripod, waiting. After having their photos taken, the students filed out of the building, some lingering, some rushing toward the school gate. Parents were already gathered at the gate. Some comforted children who had been eliminated. Others watched the entrance eagerly, knowing those still inside were the students who had passed. The gate came alive as the genin emerged. For orphans, watching that scene could be painful. Some stared with envy before slipping away. Uchiha Sasuke was one of those who stole a single envious glance and then vanished like a shadow. Izanami wasn't in either camp. At the gate, a small voice shouted, "Oni-chan, sister, over here." Hanabi, wearing a yellow-brown kimono with flame patterns along the skirt, waved energetically. Izanami's lips twitched into a smile, and Hinata returned a soft one. When they reached the gate, Izanami knelt down and gathered Hanabi into his arms. "Oni-chan, sister, I'm here to pick you up," Hanabi declared, wrapping her arms around his neck. She noticed the headband on his arm immediately. "Oni-chan, is this the genin headband?" "Yes, you can play with it," Izanami said, taking it off and hanging it around her neck. He lifted Hanabi up and exchanged a smile with Hinata, and the three of them left the school together. Years had passed. Hanabi, now 7, had changed a lot. In the original story, she had shoulder-length hair at this age, but seeing her sister let hers grow, Hanabi had deliberately done the same. Now her hair fell to her waist, 2 strands of bangs braided at the sides. Whether loose or gathered into a single ponytail for training, her straight black hair, resolute eyes, and serious expression already hinted at the heroic demeanor she'd later show in Boruto. Precocious as she was, Hanabi's development outpaced Hinata's. She would eventually be 1.7 meters tall, but at 7, she was already 1.32 meters, only slightly shorter than Izanami. Her face had lost most of its baby roundness and taken on an oval shape. Imitating Hinata, she looped the headband around her neck and giggled. "Oni-chan, to celebrate you and sister becoming genin, let's have hot pot today." "You're the one who suggested it, Hanabi," Hinata said, lightly tapping Hanabi's forehead with a slender finger. "Hey!" Hanabi stuck out her tongue. "Father doesn't allow us to eat things like this, but Hanabi really wants hot pot." Izanami couldn't help smiling at her. "All right, we'll have hot pot today." "Yay!" Hanabi cheered, then pushed her luck. "Oni-chan, piggyback?" "No," Hinata pouted. "Hanabi, you're too tall for that now." "I'm 7. What's the problem?" Hanabi sulked, then looked pleadingly at Izanami. "No problem." Izanami freed a hand, struck a mock strongman pose, and said, "Even if you were as tall as me, you could still get a piggyback." Hanabi made an adoring face and clambered up behind him, straddling his shoulders. Watching Izanami stride toward the market, Hanabi giving directions, Hinata sighed and followed, smiling indulgently. Not long after the three departed, a figure materialized where they'd been standing. A Hyuga clan member in a green vest, his eyes bearing the same pale intensity as Hinata's and Hanabi's. He was Hanabi's guard. Hinata usually had a guard when she went out, so of course Hanabi did too. But this guard kept his distance, shadowing them rather than hovering closely. Hanabi didn't notice. Izanami and Hinata did. Over 6 years, although Izanami had not yet formally met Hyuga Hiyashi, he and the future head of the Hyuga had an unspoken understanding. Izanami's role was to gently nurture Hinata and Hanabi, 2 motherless girls who grew up doted on in his care, while Hiyashi was strict at home, raising them to carry a prestigious family's honor. Under Hiyashi's high expectations, they bore heavy pressure. Around Izanami, they could relax and be children. Only with Izanami did Hanabi show her liveliness and mischief. Before Hiyashi, she behaved like the precocious little adult from the original tale. The same went for Hinata. After buying hot pot ingredients at the market, plus Hanabi's favorite mochi, bananas, milk, and Hinata's favorite cinnamon rolls, Izanami took the girls home. They feasted, then settled on a long sofa to digest and chat. Hinata rested her head on Izanami's shoulder, more relaxed than usual. "Izanami-kun, it looks like only Naruto-kun didn't pass," she said softly. Izanami, idly twining Hanabi's braided bangs between his fingers, nodded. "Naruto's chakra is strong, but maybe his chakra control is poor. His academics were weak, his shuriken throwing didn't improve much, and he often got knocked out first in survival exercises. His taijutsu is impressive, but failing this time might be for the best." Recalling Naruto's struggles over the past 6 years, Hinata agreed. Neither she nor the drowsy Hanabi, her eyes already half closed in Izanami's arms, noticed the faint smile that curved Izanami's lips as he spoke dismissively. Chapter 25, Divide into Classes, Father-in-Law in Action. Uzumaki Naruto sat on the swing, a lonely, pitiful figure. Izanami felt no sympathy. Only he knew that Naruto was on the verge of a power-up. Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke were fated rivals, 2 poles like yin and yang, and their destinies ran opposite. In their 6 years at the Ninja Academy, Sasuke had been one of the stars. If not for Izanami, he would have been the top student. Those years were, in the original timeline, Sasuke's glory days. After graduation, however, Sasuke began to suffer setbacks. Naruto, who had always finished last, began his long climb. In a few months, he went from the bottom to overtaking the former top student. Naruto looked poor and thin now, but after nightfall, he would officially get his power-up, one of the forbidden techniques best suited to a sage body and a 9 tails Jinchuriki, multiple shadow clone jutsu. Even Izanami coveted that technique. The more chakra Naruto had, the more dangerous multiple shadow clone jutsu would be. In the 4th Great Ninja War, it was Naruto's clones, each wielding Rasengan, that stood up to Madara's wood release. advent of a world of flowering trees. A basic elemental jutsu, cast by hundreds or thousands of clones, could be tantamount to a natural disaster. If Naruto had mastered a wind release great breakthrough back during the Chunin exams, he wouldn't have needed that embarrassing stunt to beat Kiba. Multiple shadow clones combined with a powerful wind technique could have wiped out most of the exam floor. Even if Naruto was currently suppressed, Izanami wasn't helpless. If Naruto mastered multiple shadow clone jutsu, his power would change qualitatively. Izanami paused, Hanabi's hair still under his fingers, and a bold idea formed. Perhaps he could obtain the forbidden jutsu tonight. Only because Izanami's Byakugan had been upgraded to the golden level would he dare contemplate it. He knew something others didn't. Hiruzen Sarutobi had prepared the multiple shadow clone jutsu, especially for Naruto. The Book of Sealing placed on the Hokage's desk had multiple shadow clone jutsu as its first forbidden technique, and the book itself had been positioned conspicuously so Naruto wouldn't miss it. That setup was suspicious. If Izanami tried to seize the book or even appear in the forest that night, Hiruzen would be watching, and the Yamanaka mind-reading techniques would find him. But he didn't need to get close. His Byakugan could see up to 80 kilometers. All of Konoha was within his gaze. If he prepared, the moment Naruto opened the book, he could copy the training method. Decision made, Izanami turned his attention elsewhere. Izayoi-kun, do you think we'll be assigned to the same squad in the teams the day after tomorrow? Hinata asked, eyes bright. More than half an hour passed. Hanabi dozed against Izanami's chest. After he carried her to her bed, Izanami returned to the sofa and put an arm around Hinata's shoulder. She leaned in, hopeful. The probability is very small, but not impossible. Izanami toyed with a lock of her hair. Team assignments are meant to balance strength. You and I have been among the top 3 in our class for years, so the chances of us being put together are slim. But we've been so close for years. The classmates have noticed, and the teachers must have noticed too. If the teachers consider chemistry, they might put us together, she said, pressing her hands together and wishing. I hope Izayoi-kun and I end up on the same team. Izanami chuckled and pinched her cheek affectionately. He didn't dissuade her outright, even though the odds were low. Hiruzen usually followed tradition when forming genin teams. In the original assignments, Naruto and Sasuke ended up in one team. The new Ino-Shikacho trio remained together, and the clan-born shinobi, like the Inuzuka, Hyuga, and Aburame heirs, kept to their own groups. This generation seemed likely to follow the same pattern. If Hiruzen stuck to convention, the only realistic place for Izanami would be Team 8, and even that would be difficult. Clan politics mattered. If Izanami, the class's top student, were placed with clan heirs like Kiba Inuzuka or Shino Aburame, Hiruzen would be risking the ire of clan heads. The Inuzuka supplied berserk partner dogs and specialized in close-quarters sensing and combat. The Aburame were the insect specialists feared across the ninja world. Would Hiruzen be bold enough to split up those heirs and put them under ordinary jonin? It seemed unlikely. What Izanami didn't know was that someone else was already moving on Hinata's behalf. Hyuga Hiyashi, Hinata's father and Izanami's future father-in-law, had quietly begun to act. At dusk, Hiruzen placed the specially prepared Book of Sealing on the Hokage's office desk and left for home. Before long, a middle-aged man in a white robe, long hair falling around the Byakugan in his eyes, arrived to visit, Hiyashi himself, no doubt. At the same time, Mizuki tracked down Uzumaki Naruto. When night fell, the blonde teenager in an orange jacket and dark green goggles slipped into the Hokage's office and took the Book of Sealing right off the desk. Not long after, dozens of figures in green flak jackets were seen moving swiftly across the rooftops on Central Street. Chapter 26. Multiple Shadow Clone Technique. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The rush of wind kept whistling down Central Street. As figures streaked through the air overhead, both shinobi and civilians realized something big was happening tonight. There were no alarms and no organized evacuations, so the villagers relaxed. Whatever it was, it didn't seem to involve them. Izanami sat on the lone sofa on his balcony, sipping juice and enjoying the starry sky. A few shapes gliding past the rooftops barely registered to him. After a while, as the after images of climbers along Central Street thinned and fewer pedestrians remained below, Izanami grew bored of watching. He went back inside, the living room lights went out, and after a quick shower, he lay down in his pajamas with a faint smile on his handsome face. Multiple shadow clone jutsu. I got it. Far away, inside a man-made cavern behind a waterfall, several figures with different appearances had used a cloaking jutsu to fuse into the rock face. With a combined long-range vision that covered 80 kilometers and the ability to peer through solid objects, they had been tracking Uzumaki Naruto in his orange jacket ever since he left the Hokage's office. Neither the Nine Tails sealed within Naruto nor Hiruzen Sarutobi, who had been watching Naruto through his crystal ball jutsu, noticed anything out of the ordinary. When Naruto opened the Book of Seals, those figures unfurled blank scrolls and began copying the training method for the multiple shadow clone jutsu. They were Izanami's shadow clones, made with the transformation technique. After copying the technique, the clones erased all traces and scents and dispersed on the spot. Izanami, who had received the feedback, didn't rush to retrieve the original scroll. He had the method now. There was no need to hurry. Lying in bed, Izanami let his thoughts wander to the team assignments that would come out the day after tomorrow. He was almost certain Hiruzen had spied on his and Hinata's training and on his fight with Uchiha Sasuke. Before graduation, he had already learned to climb trees and walk on water, skills not taught at the Ninja Academy, mastered low-level wind and fire releases, and perfected the B-rank shadow clone technique. In both taijutsu matches and no-rules fights, he defeated the Hyuga clan's main family heiress and an Uchiha orphan who'd awakened the Sharingan. For a civilian prodigy in this peaceful era, he was remarkable, second only to the legends like Minato Namikaze, who trained under Jiraiya and fought in wartime, or Kakashi Hatake, already a jonin and the creator of Chidori. If Hiruzen intended to ignore him, if he assigned Izanami to an ordinary team with a run-of-the-mill jonin instructor, that would mean Hiruzen didn't plan to invest in him. Such neglect would reduce scrutiny and give Izanami room for secret moves. Thinking of that possibility, he stopped worrying about the team assignment and fell asleep. The next morning, Hinata and Hanabi hadn't shown up, so Izanami decided to finally retrieve the multiple shadow clone scroll. He knew Hiruzen's crystal ball could snoop on him, but that didn't bother him. He simply lay down and read. The technique's hand seals and chakra flow differed from the standard shadow clone jutsu. Fewer seals, but a shockingly large chakra demand. Anyone without a massive chakra reserve who tried it risked serious injury or worse. Only those with a large chakra pool should train it. Kakashi Hatake, people joked he was a walking calculation, yet he had been able to perform the multiple shadow clone jutsu at 5 or 6 years old. Even with the Sharingan bleeding his chakra for over a decade, Kakashi's reserves remained on the elite jonin level. After losing the Sharingan, his chakric strength had recovered fast enough to perform techniques like the Earth-style wall that once encircled Konoha and had a dog's head carved into it. If he hadn't been burdened by the Sharingan, his reserves might have rivaled even Kisame Hoshigaki. Besides the Jinchuriki, very few in this era could perform the multiple shadow clone jutsu. Izanami was one of them. He was glad he hadn't impulsively used the rookie gift package on Naruto back then. If he had, his only advantage now would be his chakra reserve. Even if he'd acquired Uchiha Sasuke's Sage's Eye, awakening the Rinnegan would still take years, maybe a decade. But with Otsutsuki Bloodline Red, Sage's Eye Red, plus Byakugan's Prince Red, he could already feel the first stirrings of a transformation approaching. In less than 5 minutes, he had absorbed the scroll. There was no need to experiment. With his chakra pool, he could already form hundreds or thousands of clones by following the chakra flow on the page. To make sure Hanabi didn't stumble across the scroll and try to learn it out of curiosity, he didn't hide it. He destroyed it. He had learned the jutsu. He could always copy it again or teach it by hand if needed. By noon, still without visitors from the Hyuga, Izanami stepped out to buy ninja tools. There would be a practical test before mission assignments. On the way, he noticed Naruto being pestered by Konohamaru, with special Jonin Ebisu trailing them. The dark green goggles Naruto used to wear had been replaced by a genin forehead protector, probably after his file photo was retaken. Naruto, head down and talking with Konohamaru, didn't see Izanami. Izanami didn't bother to greet him. He merely glanced and continued to the tools shop. Coming home, he noticed 2 extra pairs of shoes at the entrance and heard sharp, heavy sounds from the downstairs dojo. Opening the door, he found Hinata and Hanabi in white training clothes, Byakugan activated, the veins at their temples bulging. They were sparring. Their hands blurred, blue chakra flames flickering around them. Each clash sent gusts of wind through the room. Hinata wasn't going all out. She was feeding moves to Hanabi. If she had been serious, Hanabi would already be badly bruised. In Izanami's and Hinata's eyes, Hanabi's attack patterns were predictable and her lower body too weak. He thought he could find time to teach Hanabi tree climbing and water walking in advance. Apart from her slightly lower Byakugan purity compared to Hinata, Hanabi wasn't inferior in other areas and could learn higher-level chakra control early, just like Hinata had. "Oni-chan, take this!" Hanabi's bright shout snapped him back to the moment. She charged in, veins throbbing and blue chakra coiling around her fingertips. Izanami barely lifted a corner of his mouth, didn't even put down the bag of tools, and used an afterimage to appear beside her. With the bare instep of his foot, he pressed into Hanabi's stomach. A gentle but powerful shove sent her flying into Hinata's arms. "Come on, both of you. Try me," Izanami said, tossing the tool bag into a corner and beckoning with a provocative curl of his finger. The sisters exchanged a look, then put on serious expressions and charged. "Oni-chan, you're so arrogant. You'll regret this," Hanabi yelled. Hinata didn't speak, but her jade-like fingers, flowing with astonishing strength and chakra, cut through the air like arrows. A louder crash than before echoed through the first floor as impact followed impact. Occasional yelps and groans mixed into the noise. If the house weren't soundproofed, passers-by might have misread the commotion. After more than half an hour, the sounds of strikes gave way to the lighter din of playful scuffling. "Wah, it hurts so much. Hiss, Oni-chan, I hate you. I'm gonna bite you to death. Didn't you say you'd make me regret it? Where'd that momentum go? Stop biting. Your injuries have already healed, and your sister hasn't even been treated yet." "I'm going to bite. Sister, bite the other side. Let's both bite Oni-chan until he cries." "Ha ha ha, the bite marks will disappear later. Stop licking, it tickles so much." "Heh, we'll lick. We're gonna get revenge on you, Oni-chan." "Izayoi-kun, it's time to get up. The class assignments are about to be made." The next morning, Izanami woke to Hinata's voice again. He didn't know when it had started, but the boy who had once been so disciplined had developed a habit of sleeping in. He had come to enjoy the princess's wake-up service every day. Hinata had gotten used to getting up early too and would bring food to rouse him. They both liked it. "Yesterday you drained all my chakra. I can't get up," Izanami complained, stretching his hand toward Hinata with a teasing tone. "Hinata, pull me up." "Liar. The chakra we absorbed wasn't even as fast as your recovery," Hinata shot back sweetly, then reached to help him sit up. Her small hand closed around his, but Izanami suddenly grabbed her wrist and yanked. Hinata toppled forward, right onto his chest. Her sturdy build easily absorbed the fall. She lay there unharmed, flushed and surprised. Izayoi-kun." Hinata's voice trembled. Years of training had made her resilient, but in that moment, she froze, her confidence gone. Her gaze darted away. She couldn't meet Izanami's eyes. Seeing her look so unexpectedly shy made something stir in him, but he pushed it down. She was still young, and their relationship hadn't crossed any line. As he went to get out of bed, his eyes caught the flash of black fishnet lining at Hinata's sleeve. Then, before he could stop himself, in the same casual tone as his country dialect, he blurted, "Hinata, I want to touch your chest." "Huh?" Hinata cocked her head, puzzled, and then her face went crimson. Her pale lavender Byakugan seemed to twist into a spiral as if some internal gauge had spiked. Her pulse hammered, heat flooded her. Izanami, seeing her go that color, hopped up and dashed for the ensuite bathroom. Hinata clutched her chest and clamped a hand over her pounding heart, breathing hard. When Izanami came out, Hinata was gone. He didn't leave right away. He opened the wardrobe and pulled out a combat uniform he'd had made at the start of the year, but never worn. It was the same style as Otsutsuki Indra's white robe, though without the wide collar and with no black magatama around the neck. He tightened the black belt, strapped on 2 white wristbands with built-in storage, tucked shuriken and kunai inside, and let the wide sleeves hide his hands. If the enemy didn't have an ocular technique, his movements would be unreadable. By the time he walked into the dining area, Hinata was already there, lunchbox open, waiting as usual. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. Even though her heart had only just calmed, it began racing again. There was simply something about Izanami. Black hair, blue eyes, a handsome face, tall and straight. The white robe gave him an air of nobility. He looked like the son of a wealthy family, not the orphan who had grown up without parents or etiquette lessons. Hinata suddenly regretted wearing an ordinary white windbreaker and pants. She should have asked her sister to custom order a kimono, then they'd match better. She resolved to ask for advice after school. Izanami had no idea what was running through her head. They finished breakfast and walked to the ninja academy together. Yo, Izanami, Hinata, morning. Still inseparable, huh? Hope you end up on the same team, some classmates teased as the pair passed by. Izanami smiled without answering. Hinata lowered her head, cheeks still pink from the morning. By the time they reached the classroom, most of their classmates had already gathered. With Uzumaki Naruto now passing his graduation exam, everyone in Class 6-1 had graduated. How many teams would be formed by the Jonin instructor was still unknown, and the students weren't sitting in assigned seats, just wherever they felt like chatting. Izanami and Hinata found a spot when someone sat down beside them. Izanami glanced over and smiled. Morning, Sasuke. Morning, Uchiha Sasuke replied, a hint of anticipation in his voice. I hope I get assigned to your team later. Aside from Naruto, it was only Izanami and Hinata who caught Sasuke's attention in their year. If they were in the same team, he could spar with them constantly and push himself. Izanami shook his head sympathetically. I'd like that too, but you know it's unlikely. The top 3 in the year don't end up on the same team. By the Chunin exams, the other teams wouldn't have a chance. Fair enough, Sasuke conceded, relaxing into his seat as he waited for the assignments. A moment later, someone squatted in front of him. Naruto, golden hair sharp as a fox and eyes that matched Izanami's but narrowed into slits, grinned up at Sasuke. The Uchiha's expression hardened. Sasuke looked unpleasantly irritated, and a faint scowl crossed his face. Izanami smirked a little. Naruto was always brazen. Really, this Naruto guy has no manners, he muttered. Yeah, Sasuke-kun, show him. A group of girls nearby hissed, all too eager to see Sasuke put Naruto in his place. But when they saw Izanami and Hinata sitting beside him, they hesitated. The two together seemed to make the girls think twice. Just then, a boy in front of Sasuke nudged backward with his elbow, unaware that Naruto was squatting on the desk behind him. The elbow knocked Naruto off balance, and he leaned forward involuntarily. Sasuke's face, getting closer in Naruto's vision, widened, eyes meeting eyes. And then, in a heartbeat, under the stunned, stone-faced gaze of the surrounding girls, Naruto and Sasuke collided, pressing their lips together in an accidental, spectacular kiss, the infamous kiss of the century. Izanami nearly whistled, wishing he'd brought a camera. Hinata covered her small mouth with both hands, her face flaming. The two boys finally snapped out of it, jumping apart and gagging. Screw you, dead last. I'm going to kill you. Sasuke spat, eyes flashing with murderous intent. There was no time for more. A wave of furious girls surged forward, the fan club who'd witnessed their idol's stolen first kiss. Led by Sakura Haruno, they shoved the boy who'd bumped Naruto aside, hauled Naruto down from the desk, dragged him beneath the podium, and proceeded to give him a well-deserved pounding. In a dust cloud of flying hair and flailing limbs, Naruto's screams and pleading wailed through the classroom. The kiss of the century was just an interlude. Iruka Umino suddenly appeared in the classroom doorway and brought the spectacle to an end. The girls, still fuming after the scuffle, reluctantly returned to their seats. Uzumaki Naruto, his face swollen and bruised, sat behind Izanami. Sakura Haruno, unable to sit next to Uchiha Sasuke, had taken the seat behind him. As Iruka climbed to the podium, the noisy room fell quiet. Every student watched him expectantly. Iruka scanned the class with a relieved smile. None of the children he had taught for 6 years had been eliminated. He composed himself and said, "Congratulations on graduating. From today, you are officially ninja in training." He lifted a clipboard. "But you're still only probationary ninja. Before you can go out on missions alone, you must form three-person teams and train under experienced Jonin instructors. Now, team assignments. He began reading names. As one team after another was announced, sighs rippled through the class, mostly from the girls. Many of them had crushes on Izanami, and the thought of not being on his team made them anxious. Hinata had already claimed a place beside him, and that made the remaining girls even more eager. With only 2 boys and 1 girl per team and just 10 girls in the class, every girl left unassigned increased someone else's chance of joining the coveted teams with Izanami or Sasuke. Team 6, Minako, Sawano Genichi, and Inuzuka Kiba. When Iruka said Kiba's name, a sharp light flashed in Izanami's eyes, and the corner of his mouth lifted. The announcement confirmed what he'd suspected. Hiruzen Sarutobi had passed over Kiba and chosen to invest the top student spot elsewhere. Between Kiba, Shino Aburame, and Izanami, Hiruzen had decided Izanami was the one to build around. The choice made sense to Hiruzen. The Inuzuka's strength relied heavily on coordinated work with ninja dogs, which made it hard for individuals from that clan to become true solo aces at the Jonin level. By contrast, the Aburame clan's insects, small, efficient, and lethal, could make a single shinobi terrifying in one-on-one combat, rivaling even the best of the Uchiha in certain encounters. The village also possessed other sensing clans, the Hyuga with their Byakugan, Aburame's scent techniques, and even a nearly forgotten foundational insect known as the micro-scent bug. That tiny creature, if reactivated, could detect a person's scent with far greater sensitivity than a tracking hound, pinpointing them across great distances. In short, Konoha had many avenues for tracking and reconnaissance. Passing over the Inuzuka for a raw prodigy like Izanami was a calculated choice. Izanami hadn't expected Hiruzen to be so bold. He hadn't known Hyuga Hiyashi had quietly influenced the decision. Hiruzen felt indebted to the Hyuga ever since Hisashi's sacrifice years earlier, and when Hiyashi had asked gently but firmly that his daughter be placed with the top student, Hiruzen found the request hard to refuse. He'd already been considering investing in Izanami. Hiyashi's visit simply pushed him to decide. Team 7, Sakura Haruno, Uzumaki Naruto, and Uchiha Sasuke. Yay! Naruto cheered at once. Sakura's face went pale with dread until Iruka finished the list and she leapt to her feet, cheering wildly at being on the same team as Sasuke. She turned smugly toward Ino Yamanaka, who and the other girls bristled at the sight. Team 8, Hyuga Hinata, Shino Aburame, and Izanami. Hinata's normally quiet composure disappeared. She grabbed Izanami's arm and beamed. That's wonderful, Izanami-kun. We're together. Izanami smiled and nodded. He'd half expected it. After 6 years of training alongside Hinata, he'd grown used to having her at his side. He didn't want to be separated from her. Team 10, Ino Yamanaka, Akimichi Choji, and Nara Shikamaru. Iruka set the clipboard down, took a final look over the students he had watched grow up, and called out, "Remember your team and your teammates' names. Your Jonin instructors will come for you shortly. Do not leave the classroom." With that, he left. No one called after him. Their attention had already shifted to what came next, their first step into life as ninja. Only minutes later, a middle-aged man in a green vest opened the door and, with the same quiet authority that silenced the room before, called, "Team 3, come out!" The students of Team 3 stiffened, their nerves carrying them back to their first day 6 years ago, as they stood and followed their Jonin instructor from the room. One Jonin after another appeared in the doorway, each taking 3 students. Chairs scraped, and large portions of the classroom emptied. Then a woman stepped in. She wasn't in a Jonin vest, but wore plain clothes, her figure curvy, long black hair curling over her shoulders, and a pair of unnaturally red eyes that swept across the remaining students. Her gaze settled on Izanami and Hinata. She smiled. "Team 8, come out. I'm your Jonin instructor." She turned and left as if she just delivered a favor. "We'll be going first. See you later." Izanami gave a quick nod to Sasuke and Naruto, then left the classroom with Hinata at his side. Shino, quiet, competent Shino, had already disappeared with his instructor. Chapter 29, Team Leader. Kurenai Yuhi led Team 8 out of the teaching building, not toward the usual training ground, but out of the village to an exercise field in the wilderness. These practice grounds were scattered all over Konoha. She stopped at a tree stump, turned to face Izanami and the other two, and smiled. Until one of you is promoted to Chunin team leader, I'll be in charge of your missions for the foreseeable future. Let's get to know each other, she continued. I'll go first. She put a hand on her hip and grinned. My name is Kurenai Yuhi. Call me Red Sensei. My specialty is Jinjutsu. I use all sorts of illusions. I enjoy a lot of things. Wasabi octopus, and I like sake and vodka. My dream is to be a kunoichi like Lady Tsunade. Your turn, she said, letting her gaze sweep over the three. It stopped on Izanami. Izanami began slowly. My name is Izanami. I have no surname. I specialize in ninjutsu. I'm good with fire release and wind release. I know a little medical ninjutsu and sensing. I like training and fighting, and I dislike many things. My dream is simply to become an excellent ninja. Kurenai nodded, already forming an impression of Izanami's strength and temperament. She then looked at Hinata. Hyuga Hinata, Hinata said, her voice soft. My specialties are sensing and the gentle fist. I like training with Izayoi-kun and my sister. I like red bean paste and cinnamon rolls. I dislike shrimp and crab. My dream is to become an excellent ninja too. Kurenai watched Hinata and Izanami exchange glances, her eyes flicking between them until Hinata's face flushed and she bowed her head. Kurenai smiled wryly. I see. Finally, her attention fell on Shino Aburame, who was nearly swallowed by his clothing, hood over his hair, forehead protector pulled low, sunglasses hiding his eyes, collar over his nose. Only a little of his face was visible. Shino Aburame, he said in his usual calm tone. My specialties are sensing and my clan's secret techniques. I like looking for insects in the forest. I prefer vegetable salad and winter melon. I don't like strong flavors. My dream is to discover new species of insects. Good. Now we have a basic sense of each other, Kurenai said, satisfied. But before we start taking missions, I need to test you. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning, right here, we'll run a survival exercise. She tapped her chest and smiled. The theme is a capture mission, and your opponent is me. With that, she waved cheerfully. See you tomorrow. Don't be late. Before they could ask anything, she blurred into an after image and vanished. The three stared at where she'd been and then looked at one another. Izanami, what do you think? Shino asked. He sounded ready to test Izanami. Though Izanami had long overshadowed him, Shino didn't feel inferior in everything, only academically. Free sparring was rare, only in the 6th year once a month. He had never been matched against Izanami. The other classmates were hardly worth deploying his clan's techniques on. Shino had also caught Kurenai's hint, and if Izanami had missed it, he would have thought him slower. Considering Hinata's relationship with Izanami, Shino was willing to defer to him as leader, unless Izanami's read of the situation was wrong, in which case Shino wouldn't hesitate to object. Izanami, unaware of Shino's calculations, answered thoughtfully. We don't need to wait until tomorrow to figure this out. As freshly graduated Genin, we can't beat a Jonin straight up. Even if the exercise is only a capture mission, if the Jonin doesn't want us to succeed, she can stop us. In the school's survival exercises, the Chunin sensei usually hold back, not eliminate people unless their performance is bad. So if Red Sensei wants to judge us fairly, she gave us a day to prepare, told us the theme and the location. She's giving us a chance to plan, to set traps. If our tactics and team coordination are solid, Red Sensei should deliberately ease up and let us succeed. Hinata's eyes shone at Izanami's explanation, clearly admiring him. Shino kept his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable beneath his clothes, but inwardly he was convinced Izanami was exceptional. He'd noticed Kurenai's hint, but Izanami had thought it through even more thoroughly. If no one besides Hinata had seen Izanami's real skill, it meant he'd been hiding it well. Shino spoke again, more deferential now. So, Izanami, what's the plan? Izanami accepted the role. To make a plan, we first need to understand each other's abilities better. He motioned them closer. Show me your best techniques and explain what they do. Hinata and Shino moved in, and the three formed a quiet circle to exchange details in low voices. Above them, Kurenai watched from a high branch, a relieved, pleased smile on her face. The hint she had left was deliberate, to test how quickly they'd pick up on it and how they would react. She hadn't expected them to be this sharp, to immediately presume the exercise was meant to test both ability and teamwork. They were a promising combination, she thought, almost fondly, that it wasn't impossible they'd win. When they underestimated her, she'd make sure they paid for it. With that thought, she dissolved into a mirage and disappeared. All right, that's our strategy. Half an hour later, Izanami looked at Hinata and Shino Aburame and smiled. I'll be counting on you tomorrow, Hinata, Shino. I'll do my best. Hinata nodded so earnestly her voice trembled with it. Don't worry. Shino nodded once as well, but inside his chest, where the Aburame insects lived and worked like a hive, something buzzed with new information. Izanami's chakra was astonishing. Among their peers, only Uzumaki Naruto came close. No wonder he knew so many ninjutsu and could even invent powerful ones himself. A boy with no clan name who held reserves like that, there had to be something unusual in his background. Ordinary traps wouldn't do. Only extremely destructive, costly tools would stand a chance, and they could just as easily hurt their own people. Since that's the case, let's head back, Izanami said. When Shino heard that no traps would be set, his expression eased. If my analysis is right, this alone should be enough to pass the test, Izanami added. Both Hinata and Shino agreed at once. Then I'll be going, Shino said, hands in his pockets, and turned away. Kurenai Yuhi had only learned about Izanami and Hinata's relationship from their introductions, but Shino and the other classmates had known for years. Shino wouldn't hang about to be a third wheel. Reserved as he was also curious. Yet out of respect for the Aburame dignity, he kept his counsel. When Shino's back disappeared among the trees, Izanami finally took Hinata's small hand. Hinata, it feels like it's been ages since we had a picnic. How about roasted fish for lunch today? Hinata's eyes brightened at the memory. After their training sessions years ago, the two of them had often gone to the abandoned training ground to eat together. Once her father tacitly approved and Hanabi joined in, they'd stopped going to that old spot and kept their sessions to Izanami's backyard or the dojo. Meals were either brought from Hinata's home or cooked at Izanami's house. The taste of roasted fish and the warmth of those childhood barbecues had become precious to her. Izanami had only needed to suggest it, and she wanted it instantly. Hand in hand, they walked to the familiar little river. Their shadow clones were left to catch the fish. The originals sparred above the water in a taijutsu duel, bounding across the surface. Chakra clashes stirred air currents and sent spray and ripples flying. Birds and small animals in the forest scattered at the noise. When their duel paused, white smoke drifted up and the scent of cooked fish hung in the air. They spent the entire afternoon like that, playful, fierce, carefree, reliving a simpler childhood. The next morning at 8:30, they reached the training ground. Shino was already standing by a tree stump, as if he'd been waiting. Good morning, Shino, Izanami said, raising a hand. Morning, Shino replied. After the greeting, there was an awkward silence. Izanami knew Shino had a reserved side. Shino's social presence was low, and his interests centered on his insects, which left little common ground for small talk. Izanami didn't risk whispering to Hinata either, who knew which of Shino's insect spies could be listening. So he leaned against the stump and closed his eyes, waiting for Kurenai to arrive. Hinata stood beside him, hands in her pockets. A soft whoosh announced her presence. Izanami opened his eyes to find Kurenai Yuhi already in front of them. Red Sensei, they both said automatically. Kurenai smiled. Good morning, sorry to keep you waiting. She produced 3 small bells and set them out. Your mission is simple. Within 1 hour, at all costs, even if it means killing me, you must take these bells from me. She tied them to her waist and set a small alarm on the stump to ring in an hour. Now, it officially begins. No sooner had she finished speaking than Izanami and the others vanished like smoke. Kurenai listened to the leaves whisper and allowed herself a confident smile. She didn't intend to use body flicker to finish them off one by one. Instead, she moved into an open space and waited for them to come to her. This wasn't arrogance so much as assessment. She had been through the academy like they had. Their foundations were good, but mostly basic ninjutsu and family secret techniques. The Hyuga and Aburame clans were well understood by others, and she, though a genjutsu specialist, was a jonin capable of at least 2 nature transformations. Even a few genin squads working together would be no match for her, she thought. Then a distant feminine cry cut through the air. 8 trigrams empty palm. The sound drew nearer, and then an invisible wall of force slammed toward Kurenai with terrifying speed. It kicked up a wall of dust wherever it passed. There was no time to gather chakra into her feet for body flicker. Kurenai could only leap back instinctively. The shockwave swept past, and the cloud of dust engulfed her. The impact didn't stop there. Trees that would have taken several men to encircle were snapped like twigs. Beneath a large tree, at the origin of the blast, stood two identical Byakugan-eyed girls back to back, holding hands. Hinata and her shadow clone. Chapter 31. Easily qualified, the nemesis of illusion. What a powerful combination. The top three really were hiding their true strength. Shino Aburame muttered from his perch in the trees as he watched the dust rise from the clearing. He sent out a cloud of insects, using the dust as cover to fly toward Kurenai Yuhi and try to snatch the bell from her waist while she was distracted. Unfortunately for him, Hinata had already sounded the alarm. As a Jonin instructor of a sensory team, Kurenai's sensing jutsu was superb. Startled by Hinata's combination attack, she re-established her sensing as the dust rolled over them and immediately detected three distinct positions of Izanami as well as the approaching insects. A popping sound like a balloon tearing echoed through the dust, and when the haze cleared, there was only a chunk of wood on the ground, with insects swarming around it. Substitution jutsu. Team 8 didn't look surprised. Hinata's temples throbbed as she swept her vision. Through her Byakugan, she tracked Shino in the tree, Kurenai, who had used the white smoke to cover a shunshin into the forest, and Izanami, who had already become an afterimage and was closing in on Kurenai. Seeing Izanami appear right in front of Kurenai and launch an assault, Hinata's lips curved faintly. She tore a strip of cloth, nodded to Shino, and vanished. The sound of insects followed close behind. Not far off, metal rang as two figures sparred in tight quarters, a male and a female whose heights differed by only a few centimeters. Both fought with kunai held in reverse grips. Izanami's kunai stabbed, slashed, and cut at Kurenai's vital points with blinding speed and decisive technique. For a while, Kurenai relied on her experience and managed to parry, but then she noticed something that made her pupils narrow and her expression change in shock. "How is that possible?" she blurted. Izanami's lips curved. In a flash, he turned into a puff of white smoke with a soft bang. Almost at once, three voices called out from different parts of the woods. "Fire release! Great dragon fire technique!" Three orange-red dragons of flame, each roughly 4 meters long, surged toward Kurenai in a triangular formation. There was no time for a shunshin, and genjutsu wouldn't help against looming fire. Kurenai formed hand seals rapidly and shouted, "Water release! Water formation wall!" A torrent of water burst from her mouth like a waterfall. Spinning, she slammed it against the rushing fire dragons. Explosions and sizzling erupted as steam and a thick white mist billowed out, spreading all the way to the clearing. Cough! Cough! Kurenai stumbled out of the mist, choking. Then she froze as a familiar sound reached her. Ding-a-ling-ling, the clear, pleasant ring of a bell growing from distant to near. A gust of wind blew the steam aside, and Team 8 stepped from the trees. Izanami stood in the middle, gently shaking the bell in his hand and smiling at Kurenai. "Red Sensei, I guess we passed, didn't we?" he said. "You were incredible. I was on guard, but you still managed to take the bell," Kurenai replied, half embarrassed by her disheveled state and half pleased by the student's spotless appearance. She smiled broadly. "Very strong abilities and excellent tactics. I lost, Sensei." Izanami shook his head and smiled. "Ninja combat is a battle of information. We got the bell so easily because you, Red Sensei, revealed your specialty and didn't have enough information on us. If it had been a life-or-death fight, it wouldn't have been so simple. We owed a lot to you holding back." Hinata and Shino, who had stayed deliberately a step behind Izanami, exchanged stunned looks. Hinata thought, "Izanami-kun, he speaks so well." Shino wondered, "Is that flattery?" Kurenai blinked, then her smile widened and her eyes softened with approval as she regarded Izanami. "You really know how to talk," she said, and with a restored, confident air, she clapped Izanami on the shoulder, looped an arm around Hinata's, and laughed. "Come on. To celebrate the formation of Team 8, Sensei will treat you to a big meal." They walked back along the forest path toward Central Street. Curious, Kurenai asked, "Izanami, How did your shadow clone break my genjutsu during the fight? Breaking genjutsu is a basic lesson at the Ninja Academy. It requires disrupting the flow of chakra within your body. Simple in theory, very difficult in practice. You normally have to manipulate chakra precisely, which demands forming hand seals. What had shocked Kurenai wasn't that the fighter had been a shadow clone or that Izanami's clones had been spread out around her. It was that his clone had simply ignored her genjutsu. That's a secret, Red Sensei, Izanami said, placing an index finger to his lips with a grin. Ninja combat is a battle of information, and secrets make a man more charming. He winked at Hinata. The girl blushed and lowered her head. Kurenai rolled her eyes. You're not a man yet. You're still a kid, she scolded with a teasing smile. Wait until you're 20 and can drink with Sensei before you say things like that. She didn't press further, but inside she was reassessing him. Izanami's enormous chakra reserves, powerful fire release, composed personality, and clear ninja aptitude explained why he had been able to overpower many clan descendants and stay top of the class. She finally understood why he had risen above the others. Izanami, for his part, didn't correct her assumptions. Of course, he wouldn't tell Kurenai that the reason he could ignore her genjutsu wasn't just a strong yin-release chakra. He could perform jutsu without forming hand seals at all. Others needed their hands to shape chakra. He didn't. He was, in his own quiet way, a nemesis of genjutsu. Chapter 32. First Fetal Movement. It was still early. After enjoying the lavish meal Kurenai Yuhi had treated them to, Team 8 didn't break up immediately. They went to the Hokage building to officially accept their mission. It was predictably a D-rank job. At first, Hinata and Shino were mildly interested, but when Kurenai led them to a foul-smelling drainage ditch and told them to figure out how to clear the garbage from the water, their interest evaporated. It was no challenge for Hinata or Izanami, both could walk on water. And Shino had already learned tree climbing and water walking back in his 3rd year. Those techniques weren't taught in the academy. They were basic clan skills expected of major ninja families. Even if Izanami hadn't taught Hinata those techniques, Hyuga Hiyashi would have once her gentle fist and chakra control reached a certain level. Controlling chakra while moving, mastering that stage of chakra control, wouldn't only increase her gentle fist's power, it would make learning the art far easier. Kurenai was a little surprised to see all 3 of them already comfortable with those skills. Once she thought about Hinata and Shino's backgrounds, Izanami's natural ability, and his relationship with Hinata, it made sense. For them, these techniques really were nothing. That realization left Kurenai in a small quandary. She had intended to use this mission as an opportunity to teach them more advanced chakra control. Now that they already knew it, what could she teach next? Kurenai's dilemma came from a place of dedication. Jonin instructors aren't simply school teachers. Officially, their job is to guide newly graduated genin through missions and help them become capable shinobi. If a jonin likes a subordinate, they might deepen that relationship and pass on skills. If not, once a genin in the squad becomes a chunin leader, the jonin might step back and only reunite when the village assigns higher-level missions. Genin can also learn new jutsu through merit points earned on missions and by trading them with the village, though the exchangeable jutsu tend to be common, low-level techniques. Only shinobi who had mastered both form and nature transformation could access the more advanced jutsu on offer. Kurenai had only known Izanami for 2 days and was already thinking about teaching him more. That kind of teacherly devotion would have moved Team 7 to tears. Meanwhile, Kakashi, lounging in a tree reading his pervy books while they cleaned the garbage, hadn't bothered to teach them tree climbing or water walking at all. After they finished the mission, received their pay, and divided it, Team 8 broke up at the entrance to the Hokage building. Hinata, let's have a proper meal today, Izanami said. Okay, Hinata answered. They took their pay to the market and bought ingredients to celebrate. They intended to cook at Izanami's place and then call Hanabi over. But just after they arrived and Izanami had kicked off his shoes in the genkan, something made him wince. The bag he was carrying slipped from his hand and thudded to the floor. Hiss, Izanami breathed, a sharp intake of air. He leaned against the wall, frowning. Hinata rushed to his side, alarmed. Izanami-kun, what's wrong? My Kekkei Genkai, it's starting to awaken. He covered his eyes and, despite the twinge of pain, couldn't quite hide his grin. His voice trembled with a strange excitement. Hinata's lips parted into a mixture of surprise and joy. Really? Izanami-kun, you have a Kekkei Genkai? Yes, it's a secret, only you and I know. Izanami placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. Hinata, I need your help, of course. She wiped away the worry and focused. Together they went upstairs. Izanami lay down on the bed, closed his eyes, and gave careful instructions. Go get a roll of bandages, he said. Hinata left the room and returned with a first aid kit, handing him a roll of bandage. He tied it over his eyes and then asked her to open the bedside drawer and take out the eye patch inside. She did as he said and handed him a black patch. Once he put it on, he formed a hand seal. A sudden, powerful sensing wave spread out, filling the stretch of Konoha's central street in an instant. A few seconds later, he relaxed and spoke seriously. Hinata, don't tell anyone about this, about my Kekkei Genkai awakening. Not Hanabi, nobody. I understand, Izanami-kun. Hinata nodded solemnly. Even without his warning, she wouldn't have said a word. Izanami had no surname and no family ties in the village. If his Kekkei Genkai became public knowledge, it would attract attention, possibly from within the village and certainly from outside. If the bloodline were from a clan that still existed in the Land of Fire, he might be able to reconnect with his ancestors. But if it turned out to be foreign, or if his background raised suspicion, he'd never be trusted by the village. His future, and theirs together, could be ruined. That had to be kept secret. I have a feeling it'll take a few days for the Kekkei Genkai to fully awaken, Izanami went on. If Team 8 gets any missions while I'm like this, you can use a shadow clone disguised as me to go in my place. But before you leave, come here and put on my clothes. Shino will notice otherwise, and make sure the clone tells them it's a shadow clone and that I'm working on a new jutsu. All right. You should also find an excuse to keep Hanabi from coming over here for a few days. Okay. I won't be able to see for the next few days. You'll need to bring me food. I might hide using an invisibility jutsu, so if you don't find me in the room, just call my name. Just don't activate your Byakugan. Hinata listened closely and nodded to every point. I understand. Izanami smiled a little. Thank you, Hinata. I'll be in your care for a few days. Hinata's face flushed with a shy, excited pride. Izanami had always looked out for her since they were children. Now she finally had a chance to repay him. The next few days suddenly felt full of purpose, and she almost wanted to go home and plan a schedule of meals and chores already. Chapter 33, Samsara Eye. He wasn't sure whether it was because his potential hadn't fully surfaced or because he hadn't enough chakra, but Izanami's first awakening didn't last a few days. It lasted 2 full weeks. For those 14 days, he lived as if blind, without light. Anyone else in that condition would have been bitter and irritable. Izanami, however, was unexpectedly content. Hinata took care of him with the tenderness of a true Yamato Nadeshiko, a devoted wife and loving mother. She brought him meals or bought ingredients to cook, worried he'd grow stiff from lying in bed, and patiently helped him walk around the room and living room. She washed him, scrubbed his back, and even washed his hair. If Team 8 had missions, she took care of them in his place. If not, she left a shadow clone at home to watch over him and talk to him so he wouldn't be lonely. Izanami only had to open his mouth for food and reach out for clothes. He lived like a useless man, and Hinata loved every minute of it. Having been cared for by him since childhood, this was her first chance to return the favor, and she threw herself into it with eager devotion, daydreaming about how she'd be praised for it. If Hyuga Hiyashi had seen them, his fists would surely have clenched. But all happiness passes. After half a month of blindness, with his brain secreting chakra every day and his eyes feeling as if something wriggled inside them, Izanami finally felt everything calm. The first stage of the all-creation power had emerged. One morning, Hinata drew the curtains and closed the door. She unwrapped Izanami's bandages with curiosity in her voice. Izanami-kun, is your bloodline limited dojutsu too? Yes, Izanami nodded. Could it be the legendary Rinnegan or the red eyes that counter the Byakugan? Hinata's curiosity brightened. He could have said Ketsuryugan, but didn't. Izanami kept his inner grumble to himself and shook his head. I don't know. If my brain hadn't suddenly started producing chakra, I wouldn't have known I'd awakened a bloodline limit. You'll see in a moment. Okay. Hinata peeled away the bandages and leaned close. When Izanami opened his eyes, her beautiful features widened. She covered her mouth and breathed. What beautiful eyes! In the dim room, his eyes glowed with blue and white like pearls in the night. The whites remained, but the irises were sky blue, and even the pupils shone blue, emitting white, flowing light that formed intricate patterns around them, exquisitely stunning. These eyes might not have been seen on Earth for a millennium, or perhaps ever before. They were not one of the three great dojutsu, nor the red counter-eyes to the Byakugan, nor the Chinoike clan's Ketsuryugen. They were the reincarnation eye, the Samsara eye, on par with the legendary top-level dojutsu, a power of both destruction and creation. What a powerful ocular ability, completely unmatched, Izanami murmured inwardly. He raised a hand and touched the corner of his right eye. He looked at Hinata, but his gaze already pierced innumerable layers, houses, streets, the village, forests, cities, transforming into an invisible mesh that covered the entire land of fire. The 80-kilometer vision of the Byakugan, Gold, was impressive, but the reincarnation eye's range made it seem infantile by comparison. In this world, it was the difference between a super Kage and a Kage, different dimensions. Just by completing the first awakening, Izanami could see the whole land of fire. What would his sight be after the second awakening or the final evolution? He withdrew his long-distance gaze and found Hinata leaning over him. He took in the sight of her, simple, modest clothing, a black mesh layer under a jacket that was unzipped at the top. His mouth twitched. He just tested the reincarnation eye's X-ray vision. With the evolution from Byakugan to reincarnation eye, his vision had finally gained color. His long-distance sight was astonishing, and his X-ray vision could penetrate objects and buildings. Like any man with X-ray vision, he'd been tempted, only to discover that when he used it on the human body, he didn't get the crude images he might have expected. Instead, he saw colored bones, organs, chakra channels, and their flow. Useful, but not salacious. Useless to those particular fantasies, Izanami thought with a wry inward chuckle. He was relieved he couldn't see whatever strange thing might be hidden on the moon, too. Noticing the change in his expression, Hinata asked with innocent curiosity, "Izanami-kun, are you testing your bloodline limit's abilities?" "Yes," he smiled. "It doesn't seem to be the Rinnegan or the red eyes you mentioned. It's something new, perhaps an ancient ability long lost." "So what can it do?" Hinata leaned forward, fascinated. Izanami raised his hand toward her. "Its first ability is raise." In the next instant, Hinata's body felt as if gravity had been switched. She floated, as if escaping Earth's pull, toward Izanami. Because it was his first time using gravity manipulation, Izanami misjudged the force. Hinata, already 8 centimeters shorter, floated just past the top of his seated form and gently bumped him. The sudden movement sent him tumbling from the chair to the floor. "Ouch," Izanami yelped, but Hinata was unhurt. The impact force had been mysteriously dissipated, and her surprised exclamation came from the awkwardness of falling more than any injury. Izanami-kun, are you all right?" she asked, quickly scrambling onto him in concern. He laughed, coughing a little. "I'm fine. I just overdid it." Izanami helped her up, smiling. "That was the ability I used." Hinata recalled the scene and hesitated. "Was that wind release?" "No, gravity manipulation and repulsion afterward." His gaze fell on a decorative vase across the room. He pointed with one finger. With a dull, unforced noise, the vase shattered, but it hadn't been struck by anything. Instead, the whole thing floated toward the wall and exploded against it by its own motion. The fragments hovered in the air then, as if with intent, drifted into the nearby trash can. So amazing. Hinata watched, stunned. Izanami switched between gravity and repulsion with growing confidence, the corners of his mouth lifting. Finally, he thought, he had something he could use to protect himself. The Byakugan's evolution into the reincarnation eye with the first awakening granted Izanami 2 fundamental enhancements and 3 major abilities. The fundamentals were the amplified long-distance vision and the improved X-ray vision. The abilities were gravity manipulation, repulsion, and a form of wireless puppetry, more precisely, an alternative 6 paths technique. He could condense chakra with the reincarnation eye and inject it into a puppet's chakra core, giving it a heart and life, and control it from extreme distances. Those puppets could channel chakra to fire light bullet attacks. If only he had yin-yang release, he could produce chakra receivers remotely to power the puppets, something for later. He brought up the light screen only he could see. Talent entries: Bloodline Limit, Reincarnation Eye, red. Otsutsuki Bloodline, red. Sage's Eye, Prince of Byakugan, red. Six Paths Talent, red. Chakra Control, gold. Uzumaki Bloodline, purple, plus. All Attribute Physique, purple. Medical Genius, blue. Points, 12,391. With the Byakugan's evolution into the Reincarnation Eye, the Bloodline Limit entry had been renamed and upgraded from gold to red. By simply completing the first awakening, the Reincarnation Eye's rank even surpassed the Otsutsuki Bloodline and now sat at the top. Izanami breathed out softly. Ultimate Dojutsu, truly something beyond even red. Chapter 34, Izayoi's Strength, the first C-rank mission. It felt like an evolution of his own eyes. Izanami's Reincarnation Eye, awakened for the first time during its initial gestation, was not only different from Otsutsuki Toneri's, it was remarkably stable. Even severe bodily injury wouldn't make the Reincarnation Eye disappear. Only the complete exhaustion of his chakra and ocular energy would cause it to revert to a Byakugan. After the Byakugan evolved into the Reincarnation Eye, his eyes continued to absorb chakra produced by his brain, storing it like a battery. Once that reservoir filled, a second gestation would occur. Just as the Byakugan had taken 2 years to gather enough energy to evolve, Izanami sensed the second gestation might also take some time. Still, awakening the Reincarnation Eye at 12 left him thoroughly satisfied. He was barely out of childhood. His real growth phase wouldn't begin until 15. At 15, a boy's body would surge. By 19, even without much combat experience, transplanting a pair of extremely pure Byakugan could let him grasp powers of other dimensions. If Otsutsuki Toneri, with only one red entry, could do it, then Izanami, who possessed several red entries, had even greater potential. Awakening the Reincarnation Eye at 12 felt like cheating, and he relished the advantage. Izanami, are you back to your main body now? After safely finishing the first gestation, Izanami returned to Team 8. Shino Aburame immediately noticed something different about his insects and stared in shocked surprise. The insects were afraid. Had Izanami grown that much in just half a month? What new ninjutsu had he developed? Yes, my ninjutsu cultivation is complete, so I'm back, Izanami said with a smile. What ninjutsu were you working on? Kurenai Yuhi asked, curious. Secrets make a person more charming. Izanami put a finger to his lips and grinned. If you're lucky, Red Sensei, you'll see it. I guarantee it'll leave you speechless. Izanami, has anyone ever told you you're extremely annoying? Kurenai muttered, a vein popping on her forehead. Izanami glanced at Hinata and asked lightly, Hinata, am I annoying? No, Hinata said honestly, then reddened at the attention. Kurenai sighed like one of the Ninja Academy students. Izanami just smiled without answering. After the small scene, Team 8 resumed D-rank missions. Sometimes they did one in a day, sometimes 2 or 3, occasionally took a few days off. Whether it was cleaning up trash, helping villagers care for children, or processing harvests, they performed well and earned unanimous praise. Kurenai tried to teach them genjutsu during that time, but Hinata and Shino declined. They preferred to cultivate their clan's secret techniques. Izanami refused too, not because he disliked Kurenai's lessons, but because he no longer needed the favor. Before awakening the Reincarnation Eye, Izanami's visible skill set had looked impressive, some flashy red entries and a showy panel, but most of those entries hadn't translated to real combat power. He had spent the past years improving sensing and healing, and his offensive arsenal was basically his father's low-level wind release and a few Uchiha fire release techniques. With multiple Shadow Clone Jutsu added, he could already take on Jonin-level opponents. Finish perfecting the secret technique he'd been working on, and he'd be an elite Jonin who could even threaten a Hokage, much like Kakashi Hatake. Now, with the Reincarnation Eye and the twin abilities of attraction and repulsion, Izanami had become something like a Tendo Pain without the Earth Explosion star. On par with Kage-level fighters, he had offense, defense, and support. He didn't owe Kurenai anything, so she remained, as in the original story, a guiding instructor who helped Team 8 learn to be proper ninja. May 1st arrived. That morning, Team 8 gathered in their usual spot. Your performance last month was excellent. No bad reviews at all, Kurenai announced as she approached. As a reward, today I'm taking you to receive a higher-level mission. Hinata's face immediately brightened. If Shino took off his sunglasses, someone might have noticed his eyes light up and the corner of his mouth curl. Izanami already suspected what came next. A C-rank mission, he asked. Kurenai nodded. Yes. Genin usually only undertake D-rank work. Only experienced genin, or genin under a supervising jonin, get C-rank missions. Unlike odd jobs, many C-rank missions require leaving the village and may involve unknown enemies. There's a real risk to life. Technically, you've only been graduated a little over a month and shouldn't be eligible, but your mission results have been exceptional. Consider this a reward. Let's go to the Hokage's office. Kurenai led the expectant team to the Hokage building. Inside, Hiruzen Sarutobi sat with his pipe, watching Izanami and Hinata. Both had grown taller than their peers, and feeling a little astonished. Had those chubby-cheeked children grown so much? Remembering Izanami's fight with Uchiha Sasuke, where Sasuke's Sharingan couldn't break through, Hiruzen nodded. All right, your team has only been together a little over a month, but every mission report has been positive. If your supervising jonin thinks you're ready, I'll assign a C-rank mission. He took a large scroll from beneath his desk and unrolled it, his finger tracing the surface until it stopped. Your sensing is good. There's a mission here that suits you. Hiruzen exhaled a soft cloud of smoke. Recently, a mining team came to Konoha on business. They fear being robbed by mountain bandits or rogue ninja on the way back, and they've asked Konoha to escort them back to the land of rivers. This mission is yours. Any objections? No, Kurenai said, respectful and sure. Hiruzen's finger, tinged with chakra, pressed the scroll. With a soft pop of smoke, a small hand-sized scroll formed. He tossed it to Kurenai. This has the client's information. Go and negotiate. Yes, Hokage-sama. Kurenai bowed and led Team 8 out of the office. Hiruzen didn't speak further, and none of Team 8 were as reckless as Uzumaki Naruto to respond. Outside the Hokage building, Kurenai opened the scroll and led them to the front of a hotel. Wait here. I'll go talk with the client. She left them and approached a carriage parked by the curb. A guard answered her inquiries and soon led her into the hotel. From where they stood, the team could see the carriage's pennant, the character Iron, hung on its side. Since their destination was the land of rivers, it likely signified iron ore rather than the land of iron, evidence that this was indeed a mining caravan. Izanami and the others mentally pieced things together. The land of rivers was said to be a challenging region, full of mountains and forests, with many mountain villages and people who lived at higher altitudes or at the foot of the ranges. An escort mission through such terrain would be risky. Chapter 35. The Frightened Yuhi Kurenai and Aburame Shino. A few minutes passed before Kurenai Yuhi stepped out of the inn. The client still needs to do some shopping in Konoha, so meet at the village gate at 8 tomorrow morning, she instructed. After we're dismissed, go home and pack a change of clothes, a camping tent, and blankets. It's also a good idea to bring some military rations pills. If you don't have room, buy a storage scroll. The pay for this job will cover it. Yes. Team 8 nodded in unison. Gather at 8 tomorrow. Don't be late, Kurenai repeated, then slipped away. Izanami and Hinata fell in behind Shino Aburame. Izanami-kun, you don't need to buy a storage scroll, Hinata said softly. I'll bring one tomorrow. Izanami pinched her cheek and teased, as expected of a young lady from a prestigious family already trying to take care of others. Support. Hinata's face flushed crimson and her voice trembled. I was only teasing. Izanami ruffled her hair, then took her small hand in his. You don't need a storage scroll. I'll bring a backpack. If we end up camping out, I'll keep watch and protect you. Hinata's blush deepened. She lowered her eyes to their entwined fingers, and a happy smile spread across her face. Her chest felt as light and sweet as honey. Their relationship wasn't formalized yet, but the way they acted together was indistinguishable from a couple. If she hadn't worried about her family and the clan elders objecting, she might already have confessed. Once they both became jonin, or better, elite jonin who could lead a clan and stand as top fighters, no one could separate them. That day couldn't be far off. Hinata tightened her grip on Izanami's hand, thinking that with a purpose and guidance, she would only grow stronger. Izanami had no idea what she was thinking, otherwise he would have smiled again. The next morning, at 7:50, Izanami and Hinata arrived at the village gate with backpacks. Shino Aburame was already there, carrying only a small pack. "Good morning," they exchanged. "Morning." "Shino, aren't you bringing a tent?" Izanami asked. "It's in a storage scroll," Shino replied flatly. "If you need ration pills, ask me." "Thanks, but Hinata already packed some for us." Shino didn't respond beyond that. Izanami tried to make conversation, but the usual easy banter fell flat. This time not because Shino was aloof, but because Izanami himself had just gone out of his way to display affection in public. Shino's mood soured, though his composed nature kept him from snapping back. Silence was his only option. Seeing Shino withdrawn, Izanami drifted closer to Hinata and spoke in a low voice, keeping to neutral topics and avoiding teasing. Their talk was cut short by Kurenai's voice. A convoy of more than a dozen people approached, led by Kurenai and an ordinary-looking middle-aged man. The man smiled warmly as he examined the three young ninjas. His eyes lingered on Hinata longer than the others. Izanami used his sensing and detected no malice, only curiosity and pleasure. It soon became obvious why. A Byakugan user was in the escort party, and a Byakugan is the most respected sensory eye in the ninja world. With its near 360-degree vision and X-ray sight, a Hyuga can spot hidden threats that other eyes cannot. For a C-rank commission, hiring someone with that ability was a bargain. No wonder the client looked pleased. "Let me introduce you. This is our client. You can call him Mr. Nishimura," Kurenai announced. "Mr. Nishimura." Team 8 bowed politely. "Hello, everyone. I'll be in your care," Mr. Nishimura said, humble and easygoing. Having a reasonable client helped reassure Team 8. They had dealt with a troublesome customer on a past D-rank mission and still remembered how draining it had been. "Let's go." "We can depart now," Kurenai said. After Kurenai and Mr. Nishimura handed pre-approved village exit permits to the chunin at the gate, the group stepped out of the village, the first time some of them had left the place they'd lived for 12 years. At first, Hinata and Shino were curious about the world beyond Konoha, but their wonder faded quickly. The Land of Fire had many prosperous market towns like Tanzaku, but most places were ordinary and couldn't compare to Konoha's development. Nobles still traveled in palanquins or horse-drawn carriages. Modern conveniences like trains were far from common. Within a day, their curiosity gave way to routine, and they focused on the mission. Ninjas moved fast. A high-speed team could cross from Konoha in the Land of Fire to the hidden sand in the Land of Wind in about 3 days. A week could bring them to the most remote reaches of the world. Ordinary people, or a caravan with non-combatants, moved much slower. Mr. Nishimura's party was a mining crew with 2 carriages, and since they were returning empty, they could travel quicker than loaded wagons. Still, the group made frequent stops, and it took them 8 days to finally leave the Land of Fire. When the path left the lowland forests and turned into a mountain trail, Kurenai turned to Hinata, whose Byakugan was already active, her temples veined with concentration. "Hinata, what's the situation around us?" she asked. "There's no danger within a 20-kilometer radius," Hinata reported. Kurenai and Shino both stared at her in stunned silence. The calmness in her voice and the certainty behind the number left them both speechless. Chapter 36. Hinata's Growth, a ready-made puppet. As everyone knows, the Hyuga clan's Byakugan can normally see objects within about a 1-kilometer radius. That figure isn't a hard ceiling, it's what you get simply by activating the Byakugan. With training and development, the range can be extended. Even so, no matter how it's refined, the Hyuga's Byakugan usually reaches only a few kilometers to a little over 10 kilometers. That was the consensus gathered by the various forces during the Third Great Ninja War. If Hyuga Hiyashi had reported this, Kurenai Yuhi wouldn't have been surprised. It's not unheard of for the clan head to exceed the recorded limits. But Hinata? She'd only graduated a little over a month ago, and her Byakugan could already see some 20 kilometers. What kind of prodigy was this? She must have broken through the Hyuga's upper limit. Izanami watched their faces change and smiled inwardly. Even Hayashi was shocked by Hinata's growth. Izanami, who carried the Otsutsuki bloodline, Red, and Hinata, the Hyuga heiress whose Byakugan was at the Red level, when he activated Hinata's ability, it was like transplanting his own eyes into her. With the Sage's Eye, Red, acceleration, the first quickening had already been achieved. Hinata's bloodline hadn't reached the Red level herself. She only needed to absorb Izanami's chakra to stimulate her potential and raise her ceiling. Starting in Konoha year 58, Hinata and Hanabi had begun to defy fate. That year, Izanami awakened the Uzumaki bloodline's unique ability, physical regeneration. He trained every day, and whether they were injured or not, he would let Hinata and Hanabi bite him to absorb his chakra. The absorbed chakra not only healed them, but stimulated their potential. Because Hinata's Byakugan purity was the highest, her changes were the most obvious. Fresh from graduation, her long-range vision already surpassed Hyuga Hayashi's. At this rate, by the start of Shippuden, Hinata's Byakugan might upgrade from purple to gold. What's wrong? Hinata tilted her head in innocent curiosity when she saw Kurenai and Shino's surprised faces. Kurenai composed herself and spoke sternly. Hinata, don't reveal your long-range vision in public. A lot of people would target you if they knew. A young main family Hyuga lady without the caged bird curse mark and with Byakugan that reaches 20 kilometers, if that value and threat were known to other villages or to the black market, Hinata would end up on many assassination lists. Okay. Hinata didn't understand all the implications, but she nodded seriously. This range is incredibly reassuring. I'll be relying on you for the rest of the journey. Kurenai said with a smile, patting Hinata's head. Shino Aburame, meanwhile, silently recalled the insects he'd sent out. Against such long-range X-ray vision, the insect's scent detection was negligible. For the remainder of the trip, Hinata would periodically activate her Byakugan to scan a 20-kilometer radius. 2 more days passed. During that time, Team 8 eliminated 2 bandit groups and scattered another. The mountain roads were steep and routes hard to change. Bandits and rogue ninja who knew the terrain ambushed at unavoidable choke points. One could either take a long detour or clear them out. Bandits generally avoided convoys escorted by shinobi, but some were reckless or desperate and chose to attack. The 2 groups Team 8 put down were of that sort, and the team showed no mercy. It was the first time some members had killed in combat. There was a brief discomfort, then they recovered. The academy taught methods for breaking genjutsu and often had instructors cast illusions of gore to steel students. Many still found it hard. But as honor students, Izanami and his teammates had long overcome those fears. One afternoon, after several more miles, Hinata activated her Byakugan as usual to scan the area. Suddenly, her expression changed, and she blurted, "Everyone, stop, now!" The convoy halted on the narrow mountain track. Kurenai's face went serious. "Hinata, what did you see?" 17 kilometers ahead. 2 people. Their chakra is very strong, much stronger than Red Sensei's. Hinata's voice trembled between panic and disbelief. She could only express the danger relative to Kurenai's strength. Kurenai didn't take offense. She asked quickly, "Describe them." "They're wearing full-body cloaks and straw hats. One moves like a scorpion on the ground, the other's riding a bird low in the sky, looking around." At once, Kurenai's expression hardened. She turned to Mr. Nishimura and the escorts. "Turn back, change route. There are S-rank rogue shinobi ahead." "Turn back now," Mr. Nishimura barked, urgency clear. He knew what S-rank rogue shinobi meant. "So they're S-rank," Hinata murmured, a little more enlightened. Izanami said nothing, but a white pattern had appeared in his blue pupils. His gaze pierced the mountains to a point about 17 kilometers ahead. There, a tall and a short figure, one airborne, one on the ground, came into view. They were the S-rank rogues Kurenai warned about, Akatsuki members Sasori of the Red Sand and Deidara. Why were they here? What were they searching for? Izanami watched Deidara riding his clay bird, scanning the area, then focused on Sasori hidden in his Hiruko armor and had a sudden idea. To control puppets remotely with the reincarnation eye, first one needed to learn puppet creation. Creating puppets required materials, which meant money. But puppets could also be bought. Weren't there ready-made ones? After ordering the convoy to turn and change course for a few minutes, Izanami excused himself ostensibly to use the restroom. When he returned, it was only a shadow clone brimming with chakra. His real body was racing towards Sasori and Deidara at incredible speed. Hinata happened to glance at the shadow clone. The clone, sensing her look, subtly shook its head. Hinata immediately averted her gaze as if she'd seen nothing. Seeing Izanami head toward the two S-rank rogues, Hinata didn't feel alarmed. From her Byakugan's perspective, he appeared at times to teleport, to pass through obstacles and cover ground instantly. She'd seen him move like that before, and didn't believe Deidara's clay bird could withstand a repulsive-style assault. If Izanami wanted to go, no one could stop him. Sasori, we've been searching for 3 days and still haven't found that mining village. Are you sure your intel wasn't wrong? The art duo had no idea they were being watched. Deidara circled the sky a few more times, and when nothing turned up, he couldn't hide his frustration. The intel came from Zetsu. It shouldn't be wrong. A black Ho family just popped up in the land of rivers, dealing minerals on the black market. Sasori's voice was low and hoarse. That family must have access to a massive deposit. If we find them, we won't have to deal with Kakuzu's mood swings, and we can stop running missions everywhere. All right, I'll keep you company a few more days, Deidara said with a resigned sigh. He set Sasori on the slope and rose again to search another area. A shadow suddenly fell over them, blotting out the sun. Looking up, both saw a figure in the sky whose back shimmered with a dazzling golden light, its face indistinct. A flying ninja? Deidara blurted. Did the old man send someone to fetch me? Among flying techniques, the most famous was Iwagakure's earth release, lightweight rock technique. Sasori's instincts sharpened. He's not from Iwagakure, Deidara. Land, now. Sasori's mouth opened into a perfect rectangle, and he fired a storm of ultra-dense poisoned needles skyward. The projectile streaked up faster than Deidara could react, ready to engulf the figure. But the needles slammed into an invisible barrier and ricocheted back, raining down uselessly. Deidara immediately guided his large white clay bird toward the slope and flicked his sleeve. Several small white clay birds, no bigger than origami, burst forth and flapped into the sky. "Explode!" he shouted, sealing the hand sign. Boom! Overlapping detonations lit the daylight like fireworks, though the sun robbed the colors of their full splendor. A gust blew away the smoke, and the shadow's veil lifted. The figure was now clearly visible. A man about 1.8 meters tall in a black robe, face hidden behind a pure white mask that matched his hair with no eye holes, an uncanny, inscrutable presence. It was Izanami, using a transformation technique. He looked down at them and murmured, "Let's start with a greeting gift." Raising his right palm to the sky, a wisp of chakra condensed and then faded. "No, this jutsu isn't finished, too unceremonious for a greeting. I'll try something new. With my current chakra, it should work." Izanami formed both hands into an unseal sign, and blue chakra surged out from him. Invisible air currents lifted, making his long white hair whip about. He held the seal for over half a minute. The aura never wavered. From the slope, Deidara watched, puzzled. "What is he doing?" "He's probably preparing a ninjutsu," Sasori said quietly. "Be careful. Anyone who can fly like that isn't to be underestimated." Sasori reached for a scroll to summon puppets, but then he and Deidara froze. Up in the sky, Izanami waved slowly and called down from a distance, "If you survive this, let's be friends." Then he turned and flew away. Noon's sun hung high and huge, but whether illusion or power, it appeared to dip and fall toward them like a blazing orb, becoming smaller and closer in an instant. What is that?" On a ridge some distance away, Team 8 and a convoy climbing a mountain slope all stopped at once, staring skyward in stunned silence. Some terrified travelers collapsed to their knees. "A meteor?" one whispered. "No, a meteorite." The orb was a meteorite, its passage through the atmosphere igniting it into a roaring fireball. Kurenai Yuhi watched the direction it came from and murmured, "It can't be. Surely a coincidence. How could anyone cast a jutsu that summoned meteorites?" She didn't notice Hinata behind her, eyes shining, watching the falling fireball with a strange, awed expression. Back with the art duo, Sasori shouted, "Deidara, run!" Deidara stood rooted, eyes wide. He was already seeing the scene in his head. The impact, the destruction transformed into a perfect, explosive tableau. "This is art," he breathed. "Idiot!" Sasori snapped. His iron tail lashed out and wrapped around Deidara, yanking him back as he leapt down the slope. He unrolled a scroll and released the trump card stored within. A white mist cleared, revealing a puppet in a black robe, human skin over a body of engineered bone and mechanism. It was the third Kazakage's puppet. Chakra threads attached to it like lifelines. The Kazakage puppet spread its hands and a torrent of black iron sand surged from its sleeves, coalescing into a massive triangular prism below. Sasori jumped onto the prism with Deidara and ordered the puppet to use magnet release to fire them across the valley toward another mountain. Chakra threads pulled the puppet, swinging them around the mountain wall to escape, but the meteorite was falling too fast. There wasn't time to clear the area. Sasori changed course. The third Kazakage angled the iron sand prism downward, carving out an artificial cave in the mountainside. Sasori, Deidara, and the puppet dove in. He sealed the entrance with a solid iron sand wall, then poured more sand to envelop them in layered protection, forming a dense black sphere. At the instant that sphere finished forming, the meteorite struck. The explosion shattered the valley with a deafening roar. Echoes multiplied the sound, and for a moment, the pressure wave obliterated hearing for Sasori and Deidara, and for every living thing nearby. The searing blast incinerated flora and fauna within the impact zone and tore away the face of the mountain where it landed. Shockwaves slammed into surrounding peaks, fracturing rock and sending debris flying. From 10 or 20 kilometers away, Team 8 and the convoy saw a towering mushroom cloud rise in the distance. Mountains blocked their view, but they felt the ground beneath them shudder. The sheer force of the blast made clear how devastating that fireball had been. The meteorite burned through the sky, but even ablaze its mass could not match Uchiha Madara's heavenly obstacle destroys stars. On impact, it was only a little larger than a tailed beast ball. The mushroom cloud it produced paled beside two heavenly obstacle destroys stars, yet the high-temperature shockwave from the explosion was far more devastating, its destructive power rivaling a tailed beast ball's detonation. When the smoke cleared, the mountain where Sasori of the Red Sand and Deidara had stood was gone. The larger peak they'd been hiding in had been half obliterated. A vast meteor crater gouged the range. Only shattered rock, blackened scorch marks, and molten meteor fragments remained. "Art! This is pure art!" Deidara shouted. The tremor had scarcely faded when Deidara, protected by layered rock and his iron spheres, emerged from a black clay sphere unscathed. He fashioned a clay bird and sent it up to scout, his face rapturous, so eager he looked on the verge of self-detonation just to outdo the moment. "Idiot, get down here," Sasori barked from below. "Not bad. You actually came through untouched." A voice neither of them expected slid into the air. Izanami's figure appeared above Deidara without warning. Deidara looked up, surprised. "Hey, don't you think the beauty of a fleeting moment is art?" "Explosions?" Izanami asked seriously, nodding. "Explosions are art," Deidara crowed. "The bigger the better. Tailed beasts and Jinchuriki are terrifying because their tailed beast balls are the ultimate explosions." "Sasori's art is eternal beauty," the former puppet master countered. "No, it's the beauty of the moment," Deidara shot back. They bickered, ephemeral versus eternal, each equally fierce in defense of his creed. Izanami stood with his arms folded, amused. I'm not wasting my time on you." Deidara huffed, then, impatient, turned to Izanami with a sudden gleam. "Hey, little brother, since you understand art so well, want to join our organization?" Deidara had rarely met someone who shared his obsession. He was half serious about recruiting the stranger. Izanami smiled playfully. "What kind of organization is it? We are." "Shut up, Deidara. Do you want to get yourself killed?" Sasori snapped, cutting him off. Deidara fell silent, but still leaned toward Izanami. "If you join, I'll tell you," he promised. "Joining's out of the question, but being friends is fine." Izanami's gaze shifted to Sasori on the ground. "I've already given you a first meeting gift, as a friend. In return, could you give me your puppet technique and the method for making puppets?" Sasori's voice dropped low. For a moment, he was quiet, then, "All right, I'll give them to you." Izanami blinked in surprise. That simple? He had expected resistance, maybe a fight. Then he recalled something. Sasori's true body was a puppet. He had checked Sasori's records while admiring the explosion. Puppet Master, purple. Kaj level aptitude, purple. Chakra control. In this world, purple-level entries corresponded to Kage-level strength. There were hardly any Kage-level geniuses now. Someone like Sasori, who bore 3 purples, was almost unheard of. Deidara at Deidara's side only had 2 purples, Bloodline Limit, Explosion Release, purple, and Kage-level Aptitude, purple. Izanami himself was, at best, a genius, blue. Sasori had allegedly transformed his being into a puppet, elevating a puppet genius into a puppet master, purple. Killing him would be a waste. It was far more useful to exploit such talent repeatedly, like Uchiha Sasuke. Izanami's reincarnation eye was approaching its final evolution. To advance further, he needed to upgrade his Otsutsuki bloodline, and that required a colossal number of points. A purple entry, once decomposed, could yield a random 4-digit amount of points. Since neither Sasori nor Deidara had died from his meeting gift, letting them live for now cost him nothing. Besides, Deidara's C4 Karura or C0 self-destruction might be dangerous if pushed too far, but neither of them exceeded Kage level. Ninja battles were as much about information as strength, and as a transmigrator, Izanami knew a great deal about them. They knew nothing about him. Sasori wound his iron tail and drew out 3 scrolls, wrapping them with the tail before hurling them toward Deidara in the sky. He didn't throw them directly to Izanami, he was simply too high. Before Deidara could descend to catch them, Izanami opened his palm. An unseen gravitational force arrested the fleeing scrolls. They hovered in the air, suspended. All creation of attraction? Deidara and Sasori both gaped. Deidara, flustered, blurted, "Leader?" A slip that made Sasori want to punch him for speaking too freely. Izanami inspected the suspended scrolls with interest. All creation of attraction, a fitting name. Does your leader also use gravity? Deidara clapped a hand over his mouth in embarrassment and shut up. The scrolls hung a dozen meters away, then slowly unfurled at Izanami's touch. No poison gas hissed out, so Izanami used the long-range sight granted by his reincarnation eye to read them from afar. Satisfied after a few quick looks, he drew the scrolls to himself. He looked down at Deidara and Sasori and waved. "Thank you for the gift. Until we meet again, my friends." Then he flew off. Sasori exhaled a long breath of relief. He had braced himself for a deathmatch if the other had turned hostile. The meteorite, the gravity ability, and the way his poisoned needles had earlier been repelled all convinced him this foe countered his style. If Deidara hadn't been there, he would have run the moment the smoke cleared. Seeing Izanami use that leader-like ability and remembering how his tricks had failed left him with a hollow, insurmountable despair. But at least the man had shown no killing intent. Still, being outmatched, then robbed of the chance to retaliate, felt maddening. Chapter 39, Puppet Master, Izayoi's Excitement. As expected of the ultimate dojutsu that can alter a planet's trajectory in its final form, even its first stirrings can pull asteroids down from orbit with gravity. Even if that jutsu isn't finished, I still have a strategic deterrent as a trump card. After flying for a while, Izayoi descended and hovered, thinking rapidly. The power of the reincarnation eye exceeded his expectations. Unlike the Rinnegan, which grants unique dojutsu and dominance over life and death, the reincarnation eye's strength was more directly destructive. If its gravity and repulsion were already this strong, I can't wait to unlock the Tenseigan chakra mode. Since his shadow clone had no pressing reason to return, Izayoi lingered at a safe distance and unrolled the scroll his friend had given him. He'd only glanced at it earlier, to confirm it was genuine. Now he read it carefully. The scroll wasn't about puppet control. Puppetry as a technique was practically useless to him, since he could already command puppets wirelessly. This scroll detailed how to make the puppet itself. So this is how bloodline limits and ninjutsu can be preserved. This guy really was a genius, Izayoi muttered. The scroll explained the construction of a puppet's chakra core, the puppet's true heart. Merely manipulating a puppet with chakra threads is little more than playing a marionette. Powerful puppets hide numerous mechanisms and weapons, and some can even channel the 5 elemental releases. Those capabilities can't be activated by strings alone. A chakra core must be installed so chakra can be fed into the puppet and its functions used freely. A puppet's strength depends entirely on what the maker placed inside it. Sasori of the Red Sand had taken a different path. He didn't craft puppets from raw materials. He turned human corpses into puppets, injecting substances into the body and altering the puppet's heart, the chakra core, so it could wield the bloodline limits and ninjutsu the person had in life. It was a whole new school of puppetry. As the system labeled him, Puppet Master Purple, Sasori was truly deserving of the title. In Izayoi's eyes, Sasori's approach was superior even to the Otsutsuki clan's puppets on the moon. Wait, a flash of inspiration struck him. Maybe I can upgrade the puppets even further. Sasori's puppets and Nagato's 6 Paths of Pain shared a similar ingenuity. During the original Fourth Great Ninja War, Uchiha Obito turned Jinchuriki into 6 Paths bodies that could use the tailed beast chakra and the abilities they'd had in life. That meant those bodies, like Sasori's puppets, retained the original user's powers. The differences were control and range. Puppets needed chakra threads, and Pain's bodies couldn't stray far from the outer path without losing signal. The reincarnation eye could fix both problems. With wireless control, any puppet in line of sight whose chakra core still held chakra could be commanded. Even across the spatial passage between the moon and Earth, a puppet could receive signals. If such puppets could also use bloodline limits and ninjutsu and be refueled from a distance, they'd be like an Edo Tensei army without immortality or a Legion-style pain force. The idea grew more feasible the more he thought it through. He hadn't unlocked yin-yang release yet, so he couldn't merge all the necessary techniques now, but he could mass-produce puppets with modified cores and, once he had yin-yang release, implant the black yin-yang receivers to upgrade them. That evening, Izayoi rejoined the team without incident. Aside from Hinata, none of them suspected the giant meteor had been his doing. Team 8 and the convoy had taken a deliberate detour to avoid the art duo, costing them an extra 3 days to reach their destination. They'd also skirted a mountain village whose chakra signature was stronger than Kurenai Yuhi's. Mr. Nishimura and his people lived in a remote mountain village, a common sight in the land of rivers. But a village that had discovered mineral deposits and knew how to mine and sell them was rare. That made Mr. Nishimura valuable. Because it was noon and the village's conditions were poor, Kurenai politely declined their hospitality. She produced the mission scroll, had Mr. Nishimura sign it, left a favorable report, and led Team 8 back. Instead of trudging home like they had on the way out, Team 8 returned, using short bursts of instant movement, leaping several meters, sometimes more than 10 with each stride. At that speed, they would be back in Konoha in 2 days at most. That was the difference between shinobi and ordinary people. In this technological age, ninjas remained the most adaptable and useful tools. When you're done with this C-rank mission, how do you feel? Kurenai asked as they walked once they'd tired of leaping. Very tired, Izayoi answered honestly. At first it was novel, but after a while it was just physical and mental torture. Hinata and Shino Aburame nodded. Escort missions are like that, Kurenai laughed. They're boring, time-consuming, and the pay is usually pitiful. But ours was special. This region is full of mountains and dangerous terrain, and we nearly ran into an S-rank rogue ninja and some mysterious powerhouse. Few C-rank missions are that unlucky. Fortunately, we had Hinata's Byakugan. Without it, we could have been in serious trouble. Kurenai reached out and patted Hinata's head. Hinata replied softly, I just did what I should. You're such a good girl. Izayoi really got lucky, Kurenai said, giving Hinata a little nudge. She didn't know that both Hinata and Izayoi had their own plans. They simply smiled and ignored her matchmaking. 2 days later, in the afternoon, Team 8 returned to Konoha. The entire C-rank mission had taken them exactly half a month. For their efforts, they each received a surprisingly large payout, 23,000 ryo apiece. After the village's cut and the Jonin instructor's share, that left a substantial sum divided among the three, which meant the mission's total reward had been over 100,000 ryo. C-rank pay usually ranged from 30,000 to 100,000, so the high reward made the time spent feel worthwhile, even if they would have preferred not to take the mission at all. Kurenai smiled and said, I'll give you 3 days off. Go home and rest. Yes. Team 8 broke up on the spot. Izayoi-kun, see you tomorrow, Hinata murmured, looking unusually tired. Rather than go to Izayoi's house, she turned homeward instead. She wanted a proper bath, some sleep, and to be at her best when she saw him next. Izayoi, whose injuries couldn't be fixed by ordinary means, had a different sort of remedy. He suddenly bent forward, kissed Hinata's forehead, waved, and smiled. "Go home and get a good night's sleep. See you tomorrow." He vanished at once. Hinata stood frozen for a few seconds, then glanced around. When she met the roguish grin of a teammate nearby, her ears and cheeks flushed a violent red. She fled, steam practically rising from her as she dashed away. Chapter 40. Farewell, Little Pig. When Izayoi returned home that evening, he didn't go straight to cook or take a bath. He went into his room and came out carrying a locked wooden box. The grim look on his face told anyone who saw him that whatever was inside mattered to him. He even reached into a secret compartment in the living room and pulled out the small key. When he opened the box, it wasn't scrolls or weapons inside, but a red ceramic piggy bank. "Little pig, farewell." His hands and voice trembled as he held it, sorrow written on his face. He turned away, closed his eyes, and brought the piggy down hard onto the floor. The ceramic shattered into 100 pieces, exposing the coins and bills that had been stored inside. Izayoi knelt and picked them up one by one, coins, bills, carefully placing them into a cloth bag. This was the money he'd been saving in that piggy bank since he was little. Pension payments from the village during his survival years, and the small rewards he'd earned from D-rank missions recently. His parents' inheritance had long ago been used up. He wasn't just supporting himself. He had to feed a growing eater, too. If not for the village's monthly relief, which had stopped when he became a genin, he'd have starved long ago. Once the coins were bagged, he added the 23,000 ryo he'd just received from a mission. Then he left immediately and headed to a shop. He slammed the bag down on the counter and pointed. "This has 388,300 ryo. I want to buy a film camera. Exchange the rest for film and photo developing supplies." "Of course, thank you for your patronage," the shopkeeper replied cheerfully. Before long, Izayoi walked out with a film camera in his hands. "Finally bought it. It's not too late," he murmured, cradling the camera as if it were fragile. He smiled to himself. "I can't go back and record the memories of my childhood with Hinata, but I can record Hanabi growing up. It's worth it." He also took stock of how poor he was now. "I'm broke. The fridge is probably empty. Tonight we'll have to go hunt and barbecue." The next morning, oversleeping as usual, Izayoi was roused not by the elder sister but by the younger princess. "Oni-chan, wake up. The sun is shining on your butt." His nose tickled. Blinking open his eyes, he found a small, delicate face coming into focus. Hanabi straddled him on the bed, dressed in a yellow-brown kimono, holding his braid and using a lock of her hair to tickle his nose and cheek. "Naughty. Next time you're asleep, Oni-chan will do the same to you," he said, smiling as he rubbed her little face. "Hey, sister told me to wake Oni-chan up. If you want someone to blame, blame sister," Hanabi said, pressing her face against his palm and looking for an excuse to shirk responsibility. "I need to wash up. Go on ahead," he told her. "Okay." She hopped off the bed in white knee socks and ran out without making much noise. After washing, Izayoi opened his desk drawer and took out the camera. As he stepped into the kitchen, he froze at the sight before him. Hinata, not in her usual training clothes but in a white kimono, the obi, cuffs, and hem patterned with pale purple and white petals. Her long black hair was neatly twisted into a bun, and she wore an apron, flipping something in a pan with careful, practiced movements. At the dining table, Hanabi was wrapping rice balls in seaweed. Izayoi quietly looked for a good angle, tiptoeing and checking how the light fell across the scene, and then clicked. The shutter caught the sisters, one standing, one kneeling, backs almost to each other, both in kimonos, absorbed in their tasks. The sound of the shutter made Hinata and Hanabi turn. "Camera!" Hanabi's eyes lit up. She took off her gloves and rushed over. "Oni-chan, when did you buy this?" "Yesterday," Izayoi answered. "Let me see," she demanded, already reaching for it. "Careful. I spent 388,300 ryo on this. Used up all my savings and the mission reward," he warned, passing the camera to her. Hanabi, without a thought, vigorously wiped her hands on the expensive kimono she was wearing, one that could probably buy several cameras, before taking it. "How do you look at the photos?" "You have to develop the film. After breakfast, I'll teach you." Okay. Oni-chan, let's take a picture too. No rush. After your sister finishes cooking, we'll take one together. It'll be more meaningful that way. Hinata smiled at the two of them. After she finished preparing breakfast and Izayoi and Hanabi finished wrapping rice balls, the three sat down at the table. They held their seaweed rice balls and posed for their first group photo with bright smiles. Izayoi in the middle, the two sisters on either side. The photographer, of course, was Izayoi's shadow clone. A selfie stick couldn't compete with a well-placed clone. After breakfast, the three of them pulled the blackout curtains in Izayoi's room and began developing film. The darkroom smell, the faint red glow, the careful plunging and rinsing, every step made the images appear, slowly and steadily. They're so beautiful. Hanabi gasped at a picture of the sisters. Words failed her. Hinata held the group shot of the three of them, and her eyes shone. Both she and Izayoi felt the same small, aching regret. If they'd had a camera when they were children, they could have preserved those years. But it wasn't too late. They could make memories now. So they spent the day taking photos everywhere, around the house, living room, balcony, dojo, courtyard, then out to the familiar, abandoned training ground and to a small waterfall that served as a local scenic spot. Sometimes they took single portraits, sometimes doubles, sometimes the three of them together. They laughed at awkward poses and reveled in the simple act of capturing moments. Passing a large old tree, Hinata tugged at the sleeve of the long robe Izayoi had changed into, and cheeks flushed, asked softly, "Izayoi, can we use the transformation technique?" He blinked, then followed her gaze to the tree and smiled. "Okay, let's do it together." She nodded happily. After Izayoi performed the shadow clone technique, two stood facing each other and formed the seals in unison. Transformation technique. White smoke rolled away, and there beneath the tree were two children in ordinary clothes, round-faced, chubby-cheeked, smiling at each other with the innocent delight of childhood. The two then looked at Izayoi's shadow clone and grinned even wider. Click. The shutter caught them, the three childlike figures under the tree, and the moment was preserved forever.